Okay, good evening, citizens and guests, council and staff. I'm going to turn it to the city clerk for roll.
Mayor Cernanek.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Brinkman.
Here.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Stallman.
Here.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Valdez.
Present. Thank you, council. If everyone could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, council, tonight we have a meaty agenda. Any considerations for changes? Seeing none, we will look for a motion on the certification of minutes.
I have a motion. I move to approve, based on the clerk's certification, the December 2nd video as the minutes for the December 2nd, 2014 regular meeting, and the December 9th video as the minutes for the December 9th, 2014 study session of the City Council be approved.
Second.
Okay, council, we have a motion and a second on certification of the minutes. Thank you for your votes.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Now we move to unscheduled public appearances or citizen comments. Unscheduled appearances are an opportunity for any citizen to express opinions or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. Generally, an immediate response should not be expected. Typically, issues are referred to city staff for follow-up information or research and reported back to the council and the individual that initiated the comment or inquiry. If any citizen would like to speak during unscheduled public appearances, please complete a green citizen card located on the table at the entrance to the council chambers. It's back there on the white table. Please provide the green card either to the city clerk or leave it at the podium. Would anyone like to approach for citizen comments? Paul.
Good evening, Council. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and all that to you all.
Merry Christmas.
I want to talk about urban renewal for a minute. That's probably not a big surprise. And I think it's in general, so I'm not stepping on something or another that's going on later on this evening. I went to the LIFT meeting last night. I've gone to 1 million LIFT meetings. I'm not kidding you, minus one that I missed. I watched those folks prepare all kinds of paperwork and talk about dealing with developers and whatnot. And on top of the blight that's all over town, quite a bit of it, and all this bureaucracy that's being created over there. Now, this is the honest to God truth. I walked out there last night thinking to myself, Paul, if you were a developer, you'd probably not even get close to Littleton for a development. You would be smart enough not to go face all the normal city bureaucracy, which is just fine, but not all the extra bureaucracy that LIFT is putting together, and the fees. You need to go look at the LIFT website. In a few days, some of the fees get posted. They were talking about, 20,000, let's make that 40,000 and on and on and on. So that's a true statement of my feelings when I left that meeting. I wouldn't go, if I was a developer, I wouldn't go close to Littleton. And that's just the opposite of what you want, and it's the opposite of what I want. I'm with you folks. I'm all for Littleton's prosperity. The problem is we just don't agree on how we're going to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else? Linda?
I'm here to talk about Resolution 54 and 149. Resolution 54, an individual citizen requested a ballot measure 54 to be put on the ballot. My question is, what is the process? Can anybody ask for a ballot measure to be put on the ballot? And do you really want to set a precedent to allow one person to lobby council to put something on the ballot? And then do you really want to approve a resolution that you may or may not adequately discuss or consider? And also, it takes an extensive amount of work to collect signatures and gather consensus. By considering Resolution 54, Council denounces and disrespects the extensive work of the citizens to put any measure on the ballot, and you are allowing lazy individuals to or groups to put a measure on the ballot without doing any work at all. So is this really fair? And again, it's Walmart all over again, where the council is blind to concerns of its citizens. So Resolution 149, this is the urban renewal funding. So again, you promised urban renewal wouldn't cost the taxpayers a dime. This is clearly not the case. This is only just the beginning. You can't do much for $200,000 with the initial funding of $50,000. That initial funding of the $50,000 are for expenses that have already been accrued, and the $50,000 is not enough to cover the expenses already accrued and any major modifications to the Santa Fe and Columbine urban renewal plans, which are coming to you early next year. So also the number of properties and the size of the urban renewal areas that you've approved means council will need to front more and more money to support urban renewal. It's pretty big. I would suggest you either fund this adequately or pull the plug. So then this $200,000 is really on top of the approximately $100,000 the city has already spent on urban renewal. Again, you promised that this would not cost the taxpayers a thing. And this $200,000 is also in addition to your legal battles, and it could be very costly. And then there is no guarantees that we, the taxpayers, will be paid back. And you're also blindly funding LIFT without knowing how the money will be used. This is it's coming to a little riverfront all over again. So my question is, how much is too much taxpayer money to spend on urban renewal? Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone else? Seeing no one. Oh. Carol?
I'm Carol Breezak in the 4th District. You have a lengthy agenda tonight, and there are several items on I'd like to comment. I'll go in order that they are. The first one is granting the authority to the city attorney to institute and defend the legal actions for urban renewal. I'd like to see a cap put on that amount. I'd like to see it created as a loan, not as money that's just given. I think Linda made the point that urban renewal wasn't supposed to cost us anything. It's costing us plenty already. They have their own legal counsel, and you've made it very clear that they're a separate entity from this one, although I've described it as an arm's reach while you're hugging. The next item on your agenda, it's the cooperative loan agreement, the IGA with LIFT for a $200,000 loan, starting with a $50,000 advance, which Linda also told you, will be reduced to $10,000 once they get it, because they're in debt. I'd like to see you discuss what will you do if there is no revenue source, because right now there is no revenue source for LIFT. So how do you expect them to pay you back? What happens if they don't pay you back? We know what happened with Riverfront. We wrote off a $9 million debt. The next item is the ordinance on the first reading of a charter amendment to be placed on the ballot. Placed on a ballot after citizens worked for 3 months to get signatures to bring a petition to the voters. This is an insult, as Linda said, that a group who happens to favor the position that the majority of this council has could come before you at the last minute and have a question be put on the ballot. There's something really wrong, and if you start doing this, it will create a precedent. The last one is the resolution. I resent having tax dollars spent on our council thwarting the efforts of citizens. 3,926. And I do want to go back to this loan agreement that you have, or you're going to be creating with Lyft. Linda said that you've already spent $100,000. You've spent that, but you've also spent $142,000 because Lyft started with $142,000 that was collected to pay off the obligation of Riverfront. It never was sent to the taxing entity it was meant to go to at the end of that project, which was the city of Littleton. So we've given up the $142,000, we've given up $100,000, and now you're negotiating to loan them money and to give them legal services at our expense. And it's too much, particularly when you told us it wasn't going to cost us anything. I do want to tell you about a little quick incident at Lyft last night. There was a minor discussion about how a document goes from the planning board to the city council and gets changed without the Lyft board knowing about it. And their executive director told them that the change came from the city manager and it happens all the time. That is not open, transparent government. And it needs to stop. Going to a Lyft meeting and coming here and you talk about urban renewal is like being in two different universes. You guys are not on the same page. And things are happening and being manipulated behind the scenes that we all see that are there paying attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Pam?
Good evening, Council. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live at Crestline in Nevada in District 1. So first, I'd like to echo the sentiments of Linda and Carol regarding the resolutions on the ballot measures. If it took each petition carrier about 6 minutes to get a signature, which I think is about right, and there's 4,000 signatures, that's about 400 hours that a number, dozens of citizens invested in getting these petitions. Not to mention the time of the people who signed it, because they took time to listen and to consider and then to sign. I heard some people say that these folks who signed were misled. I'm going to tell you what I told people. I told people, this is awful. We shouldn't have to do this. And the only thing worse than making citizens consider changes to urban renewal is the way that our city government is conducting urban renewal, which is not transparent, not open, not coordinated, poorly planned, and poorly defined. You cannot manage what you cannot measure. The so-called plans have no goals, no timeline, no milestones, and so we can't check you, and you can't check Lyft. So I'm going to urge you, please do not pass the two resolutions here to tell citizens to vote against that. And please do not let someone, Johnny-come-lately with 40 minutes writing an email to a council member, get on the ballot. These efforts are not equal. But the one good thing about it is if you vote for it, you're on the record. So I'd like you, though, to get rid of him. Just vote against him. The second thing I wanted to talk about is your advocacy to the Colorado State Legislature to pass meaningful condo reform, and I'd like you to revise it. It says that we want you to let developers develop. And I'm going to ask you to revise it to iterate that there need to be protections for the buyers of the condos. I'm going to remind you that the townhomes that are right over here on Prince Street around Riverwalk have defective basements, and that caused residents all sorts of problems. So we have that right here in River City, in Littleton. Please revise this resolution and ask the Colorado State Legislature to pass meaningful reform, but add protections for the buyers. It's vital. The third thing I want to say to you, I hope is positive, and I'm really excited. The study session you had last week, I'm smiling at you, Council, and I rarely do that, made me very happy. Staff and you worked together to get a forward-looking plan about what our obligations are to the city and the people for 30, 40 years, and that is awesome. It's about streets and street maintenance, and it's also about a couple of problem areas. And thank you so much for doing that. I'm very grateful. And I'm going to urge you to extend that. So what good managers do is have every department put those kind of plans together. Sorry, Councilmember Stallman, but it is. This is what management does. Have every department do an extension. You have to set up some assumptions for all the departments and input to 30, 40-year plans. They're not right, and that's not the point of them. They're a benchmark, and again, you cannot manage what you do not measure. So thank you so much for that study session. Please continue that across it so we get an integrated picture of city government in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Pam. Anyone else? Norm, first.
Let's do first.
Oh, I was going to get Norm. Okay.
I'm with him.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Norman Stucker. I live at 801 Shadycroft Lane. My business is located at 2009 West Littleton Boulevard. I chair the Economic Development Commission for the South Metro Denver Chamber, and I'm a member of the Littleton Strong Group. We represent a rapidly growing group of concerned property owners, residents, employers, and business owners called Littleton Strong. We formed recently because we are deeply concerned about the likely negative impacts to Littleton if the anti-urban renewal initiative referendum is approved in this special election. We are here this evening to ask you to support our proposal for an additional referred measure on the March 3rd, 2015 special election ballot. It is our belief that Littleton supports urban renewal, but that the Littleton community wants to see stronger controls over the use of eminent domain and condemnation. We have proposed a ballot measure that, if approved, would prohibit the use of condemnation and eminent domain by Littleton's Urban Renewal Authority unless it is through a friendly condemnation requested by the affected property owners. This will strengthen existing protections for private property owners in Littleton's urban renewal districts, and we urge Council to approve this ordinance and refer it to the March 3rd ballot so that voters have a choice. Ultimately, we all want the same thing: a healthy and strong Littleton community. We want to see property owners protected, and we want to see our local economy protected as well. Urban renewal is a key part of that solution, so we ask you to do two things. One, approve the resolution tonight opposing the anti-urban renewal initiative. Move forward our proposed referendum to second reading. It will strengthen the protections for property owners in urban renewal districts. We believe that voters in Littleton should have a choice on the March 3rd ballot to keep Littleton strong. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Norm. Stu?
Good evening, Council. Stu Maher, 5645 South Cocker Street, Council District 2, and past Chair 2010 of the South Metro Denver Realtor Association, and here to speak on behalf of the Littleton Strong organization, which is coming together to provide choices for Littleton's voters, taxpayers, homeowners on March 3rd. Littleton property owners are opposed to the anti-abortion renewal measure because it will inevitably diminish Littleton property values. Littleton is a wonderful, attractive community. It's the reason that so many people have chosen to invest their home ownership resources in our city. Like all communities, we balance challenges and opportunities, especially in critical commercial corridors throughout our urban renewal districts and particularly surrounding our transit stations. An essential civic tool in transforming these opportunities is urban renewal. because of the strength of the private-public financial options it provides. Cities across Colorado have shown the way, including many of our neighboring towns and cities. But we all know that three major obstacles for development are time, risk, and unpredictability. This initiated referendum will impose inordinate, perhaps prohibitive, additional time, risk, and unpredictability to the urban renewal process. Our community's ability to employ best economic development practices will be severely damaged. The myopic anti-urban renewal initiative driving the unfortunate and expensive March 3rd election is a clear danger to the housing investment so many homeowners have made in our community. We urge you to give our homeowners, our voters, our citizens a choice on March 3rd. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we will move to our comments and reports. First up is City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug? Dun, 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 dun. There it goes. We're going to dim the lights here, too. No. Bear with me for 1 second. All right, 37 seconds. There it comes. All right. Our manager's minute for December 16th, also my mother's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. Number one, notice anything different in the council chamber. If you turn around and look, you will see the large city logo behind you. You notice the old one is gone and replaced with the new one. There you have it. So I apologize. It took us a little while to, it's always down, so we never think about it. So, but that's done. It's great. And thanks to Kelly and her staff. Number two, in October, an interim audit of the Littleton Inglewood wastewater treatment plant was conducted. It found that the, quote, use of a management system approach is generating positive outcomes for the biosolids program in the areas of regulatory compliance, environmental performance, quality practices, and relations with interested parties. It recommended platinum certification of the biosolids program. So we're excited about that. Stay tuned for more. Number three, Care 10 is now in service, staffed with a paramedic and a physician's assistant. They respond Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They have established relationships with community partners to help uninsured, underinsured, and underserved patients. And I believe our Littleton Independent reporter is going to do a ride-along here. We've got great responses. The citizens have loved it, and we're working with Kelly and her staff to get some detailed information out in the next Littleton report or the one after as soon as we can get it out there. But we're very excited about that program. Number four, LFR staff, led by our Chief Armstrong and Emergency Manager Jim Olson, collaborated to create policies to identify and treat patients that may have been exposed to the Ebola virus. This is supposed to be positive stuff, but we'll take that one as positive. Number five, economic development staff was contacted by the City and County of Broomfield about the Revitalization Incentive Grant and the Main Street Historic District Grant, and the City of Inglewood and the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City about the business retention and attraction programs. So our economic development programs are getting out there in interest from others. Number six, some of you were there to wish Master Patrol Officer Brian Lynch a fond farewell as she retired from the Littleton Police Department after a 25-year career. She was a field training instructor and a member of the SET team and the South Metro Drug Task Force, and we wish her the best. Number seven, the Littleton Museum will finish the year with more than 130,000 visitors for the sixth consecutive year. Number eight, Bemis Library now has 14 large print book club kits available for checkout. Each has 5 large print books, 1 CD book, 1 DVD, and a book club guide to encourage these popular gatherings. Number 9, Mayor Cernanek and Kelly Nardi hosted the entire third grade from Centennial Academy last week here in the Littleton Center, this very room. One of the teachers sent a note that said, quote, "Please let everyone know how beneficial this visit was for us and how much we appreciated you all taking the time out of your busy schedules to help the next generation see their role in local government." Thank you, Mayor. Number 10, She's saved the best for last. Drum roll, please. By the end of the year, Community Development will have issued permits with a construction value 3 times more than last year and 2 times greater than 2012. This is an all-time record. The total value of the construction will top $130 million. You can take that to Ray Rakowski and see what he says about at your next Metro mayors. He might add a 0 onto that, but it's all relative, right? So, and last but not least, I certainly want to wish our employees, our citizens, and you, Council, a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and look forward to continue our successful progress in 2015. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilmember Stein?
And a Happy Hanukkah.
And yes, we could go on.
Councilmember Brinkman?
No report.
Councilmember Valdez?
Quickly, East Elementary, I found out today, after speaking with those folks, that the Great Schools Organization has reviewed East Elementary and has nominated East Elementary for an award, which has not yet been disclosed which award. So, more coming.
Left as a mystery. So,
me too.
Yeah. Councilmember Stallman?
Thank you. Attended the LIFT board meeting last night, a synopsis of the work that was conducted by the board. The 2015 budget was reviewed and approved. It's very high level. It makes some assumptions that there are a couple of projects and there are some fees that are being proposed to cover LIFT's costs for reviewing deals as they come in and to make sure developers, if any, have some skin in the game. The board approved 2 resolutions, the first recommending a sales tax be added to the TIF component of Columbine Square, and the second recommending sales and property tax both be added as TIF components to the Santa Fe urban renewal areas. The intent is to streamline the amendment process to avoid having to bring individual project amendments, I should say, back individually every time somebody comes in with a concept. Cooperation and loan agreement, IGA, with the City of Littleton was approved. The county arbitration is in process, and that is expected to happen rather quickly. Apparently, both the county and the city have selected arbitrators, and those 2 individuals will then pick a third, and the issue then will go to the 3 arbitrators having to do with the county's protesting I believe it's the plans that we had submitted, as well as the ag land issue. Actually, the ag land issue, I think, is going to get litigated, and that isn't quite there yet. Okay. The board also talked about process documents for developers approaching LIFT in terms of what was more or less referred to as a pre-development agreement, and again, this is where the cost to enter into agreement is greater than 0. They talked about a sliding scale so that small projects could be done at not a substantive cost, to make sure that there is some skin in the game. There were draft applications of proposed project forms, development concept proposals, funding request forms, statements of financial capability, and those are going to be circulated to the board for additional comment in terms of establishing process. I wanted to maybe just ask, based on a couple of the comments that were made, the city manager, I could be wrong, and correct me if I am, but I don't ever recall the council stipulating that urban renewal wouldn't cost the city anything. Is that an accurate representation?
I do not recall either, but I'd have to go back and look at the videos and see. It's something we can certainly do if the council desired.
Okay, good. And then the whole issue of the riverfront $9 million, that was written off because, as I recall, and we talked about this before, the city purchased the bonds, and that was an unusual arrangement that nobody expects to be replicated. If the city hadn't purchased the bonds from that project, in theory, there wouldn't have been anything to write off of that magnitude.
At that magnitude, yes. We also put some land under it, and there was an initial loan, I believe, as well. But
okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then I guess the last thing I'd like to just observe is we know we had many instances of unsolicited comments about people being told when their signatures were collected for the ballot initiative that condemnation could take their property, could take their home, that taxes were going to be taken from the school district, and so forth and so on. none of which is accurate. So, frankly, I guess manipulation behind the scenes cuts both ways. Thank you.
Councilmember Cole.
Time's sake, no report.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
No report.
Okay. And I wanted to make sure that everyone feels the holiday happiness. I know that sometimes there have been events that might have occurred in folks' lives. I hope that the events this year are able to overwhelm them. And with that, the city of Littleton has certainly been known for its hospitality around the holiday season. It begins on the Friday after Thanksgiving and extends then through the month of December. Hudson Holidays is certainly there. I know this evening I was behind someone driving down Main Street enjoying the lights, and that was very good. But as part of the holiday season, Council, we do not have a meeting next week on December 23rd, and we will hopefully have a brief meeting on December 30th at 4 p.m. So please make some notes for that. And then also, we're not going to be spending group time, particularly looking at our 5-year projections, but they have been sent to you. So if you have some questions or issues about those, I think after the auditors leave on Friday, that Director Farman will be more than happy to deal with those. And a reminder as well, Council, hopefully not during your spirited holiday time, but remember the survey results from last week and dealing with those as we look forward in reviewing our goals and objectives. So again, happy holidays to everyone. Moving to the consent agenda. The consent agenda items can be adopted by a single simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Consent agenda items are enumerated tonight from 7A to 7F. Item 7A is a motion 14-306. It's a motion to appoint Ethan Fellman as our municipal court judge for a 2-year term and to provide a compensation adjustment based on his 2014 performance evaluation. Item 7B is Ordinance 50-2014. It's an ordinance on first reading removing the permitting requirement for alarm businesses and providing that the administrative fee related to false alarms requiring fire department response be set by council resolution. Item 7C is Resolution 114-2014. It's a resolution authorizing a working memorandum of agreement by and between the Littleton Police Department and the Douglas County Department of Human Services. Item 7D is Resolution 145-2014. It's a resolution authorizing an amendment to agreement regarding design and construction of drainage and flood control improvements for the South Platte River at Reynolds Landing. Item 7E is ID 14-368. It's a motion granting authority to the city attorney to institute and defend legal actions.
Pull.
Item 7F is Resolution 147-2014. It's a resolution adopting and entering into the trust agreement for the Colorado Firefighter Heart and Circulatory Benefits Trust, and that has been modified to include specific names versus what might have been circulated earlier. So, Council looking for a motion to approve items 7A through D as well as 7F.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Council, we have a motion and a second on consent agenda items.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole?
Yeah, I guess I had expressed my concern. I think it's good for us to know when something is coming forward as a legal issue and approve each one, and that way we know, the public knows, everybody knows, and we have a good hand on it. So I'd much rather we approve approve each one as it comes forward, because I'm hoping there will be very, very few.
Okay, other comments from council? Council looking for I'm looking for a motion on 7E, please.
Motion to grant authority to the city attorney to institute and defend legal actions.
Looking for a second?
Second.
Okay, council, we have a motion and a second. Additional discussion? Okay. Seeing none, the motion is for agenda item 7E. It's ID 14-368.
The motion is 6 in favor, with Councilmember Cole voting no. The motion carries.
Thank you, council. We now move to ordinances for second reading and public hearing. First up is item 8A. It's ordinance 45-2014. It's an ordinance on second reading approving the amended general planned development plan for the Safeway Oakbrook Shopping Center.
Mr. Mayor, I'll give you the
Director Van Nimwegen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got the public hearing roster and the exhibits.
Thank you.
So just give you an idea of where the property is and the development around it. It is on County Line at the corner of basically County Line and Phillips Drive, Phillips Avenue, which is about a quarter mile east of Broadway Road. As you can see from the zoning map, the site is zoned PDC as well as some of the properties around it, which includes the shopping center. When you get closer to Broadway Road, we have a car dealership, and not too far away, we have other commercial and light industrial uses. And then we have the Oakbrook neighborhood that's zoned R3. When you look at the aerial photo, just to give you an idea of the timing of how the development occurred, so Oakbrook, most of the residences were built in the 1982 range. We came through with the planned development that originally approved this shopping center in 1983. And then the shopping center was built in 1984, which was anchored by a Safeway store. This is the planned development. It has been amended a couple of times. So what you see is underlined is the 1983 planned development. And it was amended in 1984 to make room for the Safeway Center. They basically straightened out some of the angularity of the western side of the site and made room for Safeway. They shifted some of the square footage, and they reduced the amount of retail square footage on this site, which is the blue site, roughly, in 1984 to change the square footage from 60,000 square feet to 55,800. So in essence, they're pushing the square footage to make room for the Safeway on the west end of the site. I'd also like to point out that in 1983, the green area, which is directly north of the subject site, did allow office buildings of various heights. The ones closest to the neighborhood were limited to 1 story. And the large site kind of in the center, right below 1998, allowed 50 stories with the original plan. Then in 1996... How
many? 50 stories?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've been saying that all day. 50 feet. It's a big difference. Okay. Let me start again. So that original, that site did allow 50 feet for an office building. In 1996, Courtesy Ford wanted to park vehicles on that site, which was a new use, required a major amendment to the plan development. 2 of those buildings were eliminated. The 2 office buildings adjacent to the neighborhood were eliminated, and they reduced the height of that of that building from 50 feet to 36 feet. And that's where we are today as far as the plan development. So we're really looking at 3 changes to the plan development. Number 1 is to allow an assisted living use, which is not a permitted use today. I think as far as the number of comments you'll hear, I don't think anybody sees this as a negative use to the neighborhood. In fact, when you would lay out a shopping center, a lot of times you'd use residential as a buffer to a single-family neighborhood. It provides about 20% of the vehicle trips if the site was retail or office. But really, the impacts fall under number 2, and the applicant is asking to increase the maximum height of this site from 36 feet to 41 feet. And I'll get into a little bit more of the nuances of how we measure height a little bit later on. So in essence, what staff's saying is this is roughly a 5-foot difference between what's allowed and what is proposed. Now, the planned development has 2 levels of height. It allows for retail buildings to be limited to 30 feet, office buildings to go up to 36 feet. And then they're also asking for an increase in square footage. As I mentioned, the plan allows 55,800 square feet. They're asking for 128 assisted living units for a total of 98,650 square feet. And I wanted to point out that the building footprint is reduced from what's allowed in the plan development. So in the plan development, you can cover up to 40,800 square feet of that pad. And they are asking for that to be basically reduced to 22,432. And that's, of course, because they're building up. So this shows the footprint of the assisted living facility and how it fits in with the center, the way the center is today. I do want to point out that the plan development C category requires no buildings above 30 feet within 150 feet of a residential district. And in this case, the building is just outside that 150-foot barrier. And the applicant has pointed out that it's roughly 80 feet to the property line, and then we have a 70-foot right-of-way before we hit that common boundary or residential boundary with Oak Brook. And I think that's why the shopping center was laid out this way, is specifically to meet that requirement of the zoning code. So anyhow, it is outside that limitation, so there is not that automatic 30-foot stipulation that's required. Here's a quick look at the building elevations. I think I wanted to show you this as the top elevation is you're looking at the building, and here you're seeing the full 51 feet of the structure. And you can also see how the grade changes on the site as well. And then as you go up the driveway, you see the elevation on the bottom half of this slide. This shows the topography of the site, and I know it's hard for you to read, but every one of those squiggly lines indicates a foot change in elevation. So what you have from the main entrance here to Phillips Drive is roughly a 20-foot difference in elevation, Phillips Drive being 20 feet above this site. Within the site itself, there's roughly an 18-foot difference from the front entrance, or that little turnaround that you see, to the top corner of the site as it's shown on this exhibit. So per our zoning code, we included this in your packet. It's an unusual way. It's not unusual. Actually, a lot of zoning codes are geared this way. There is a bias towards allowing a greater height per the zoning code. So there's 2 methods of measuring height. If you have a change in elevation from one corner of the building to another corner of the building below 10 feet, then you measure from the lowest point and you go up. If you have a change in elevation that's greater than 10 feet, then you're allowed to go up 10 feet and then the allowed building height. So in this case, if it's an office building, 36 feet would actually be 46 feet from the front door of the building. And I might just add that this was always a part of our zoning code, except we referenced back to the 1997 Uniform Building Code for this definition, and actually these exhibits came from there. Now, as you probably know, the Uniform Building Code went away for the International Code Consultants Building Code, so we brought forward an amendment to the zoning code that basically takes the words out of the 97 UBC and puts it right into the zoning code. And I think the feeling of council at that time is they want to stay consistent with how we've looked at height from basically the beginning of the zoning code to today. So on the top here is an exhibit that came from actually the 1983 plan development. Shows that change in elevation. They chose to draw in a 30-foot building basically from the lower elevation, but it does show how this site changes in elevation. And then on the bottom half of the slide is an exhibit that the applicant put together that shows what is being proposed today, basically. So he's showing a sight line from the other side of Phillips Road, I think actually in the backyard of one of the residents, and looking at what an office building that could be built at 36 or 46 feet from the lowest elevation versus what they're proposing, which is a 41-foot building or 51 feet. I think just to help you understand this height issue, if you're standing in front of the entrance about to go inside the building, that's a 51-foot building that you're looking at. If you're up on Phillips and you're looking at the building, it's roughly a 30-foot or a 31-foot building. As a point of context, if you look at the allowed heights in the R3 district, that also allows a 30-foot building within the R3 district. Actually, the McGlones, I'm sorry this is so dark, or perhaps you can see it better on the TV, but I think they did a good job in providing to the Planning Commission what this building potentially would look like from their backyard. And what I've done is show basically with the blue line, I added that, is that 5-foot difference basically. So again, going to 36 feet, it basically lop off the north half of that building. And if it was 30 feet, I guess take an equal distance and again, take that top of the building off. And I think what we're main concern is the views of the Front Range. And I think the point I wanted to make with this council is that even with those reductions in height, I think we're still going to have a blocked view of the Front Range from this particular residence. Now that'll change a little bit as they go up, and they do have another exhibit that you'll probably see where it's a view from their second floor patio. You get a different perspective, and I think if you bring the height down, you just see the tops of the mountains to the west. One of the things the applicant is proposing to do to help buffer that building is provide additional trees at the entrance to the driveway. So that's Phillips at the north, and this is the driveway that goes around the site. They're providing additional trees on the left half, are evergreen trees, again to try and bring down the scale of that building, but those trees can go to a 40 or 50 foot height just by themselves. So whenever we're talking about a rezoning, and in essence this major amendment to the plan development is a rezoning, we compare it to the citywide plan, and staff believes it is consistent with the citywide plan, and I'll just walk through those policies. Policy 1.6 of the citywide plan encourages housing that responds to changing demands in local housing market, allows every generation income group to call Littleton home, and otherwise follows this plan. And I think you all know about the aging demographic we have in Littleton. We really do not have, that I'm aware of, an assisted living facility within the boundaries of Littleton that provides this kind of housing option to our seniors in Littleton. So for that, we think this is a good use. Policy 1.8 requires that new commercial development be appropriately buffered from adjacent uses. We'll call this commercial development. I think we consider it a residential development, but there's a number of things that we think they're doing to buffer this use from the adjacent neighborhood. One is the reduction in traffic with this use. Another is noise will certainly be lower. The loading bays for this project face to the northwest corner of the building, away from the neighborhood. And because of the reduction in trips, we think the noise will be down, and also most of the noise will be centered at that front door. So really, for those reasons, the reduction in traffic, the reduction in noise, we do think this is a good buffering use from the adjacent neighborhood. And then encourage high-quality design, architecture, landscape architecture. The applicant has provided some pretty detailed design guidelines as part of the plan development that we will hold them to when they come through to get final approval of the project. If you look at the south neighborhood plan, they really mirror what the citywide plan is, that the residential areas be protected from a commercial and industrial development, and that we provide a mix of housing styles. So finally, Council, staff is recommending approval of the project as proposed because we find that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, promotes the general welfare of the community, and meets the intent of the Plan Development District. The planning, I put Planning Commission. Shame on me. It's Planning Board. Reviewed the project on November 10th. They disagreed to a certain degree. They felt that it was an appropriate use. They recommended that they reduce the height from 41 feet to 36 feet, or 46 feet or 51 feet down to 46 feet. And another thing I wanted to touch base, the applicant or the neighbors did provide you quite a lengthy list of petitions of folks against the project. We did check to make sure that meeting, whether it met the requirements of the city charter, section 37, which requires 20% people, when you have 20% of the area of the landowners that surround the project against a project, that requires at least a 5-2 vote for approval by the city council. They are roughly at about 1%. And again, it's because the site has kind of an unusual configuration, but we don't have that issue before you. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Council, at this time, questions? Councilmember Stallman.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Glenn, the property's been vacant for 30 years. Talk to us a little bit about the likelihood of development assuming this project were not here tonight. What are the prospects for the development of this parcel, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think, and the applicant will, I'm sure, get into that in a little bit more detail, but it has been actively marketed for 30 years. We do have a major tenant on one end, and I think trying to find a major tenant now in today's market of 55,000 square feet, I think it's a challenge to find a retailer of that size to locate at the site. And I'm sure the landowner, if he had one, would certainly sell at a higher dollar price for a commercial developer. So I think just the test of time, this site just doesn't work. I think the other thing that perhaps has worked against it is whenever you build those pads first in the front, you tend to hide these sites, and I think that perhaps has hurt the marketing of the site as well.
Okay. Can you provide some additional flavor from the planning board's conversation around their decision to reduce the height from 41 to 36 feet?
Well, I think they certainly felt for a lot of the neighborhood residents that spoke against it, and I think the feeling was, well, let's perhaps split the difference. We do know that an office building could locate here at 36 feet, so let's say that's the height requirement. I think that was really the feeling.
Okay. Talk a little bit about, there's some of the, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure we'll hear more of this when we get into the public commentary, but in this instance, there's an elevation difference, there's Phillips Avenue sort of runs up, and then the majority of Oak Brook sort of goes to the north, a little bit to the east, a little bit to the west. Certainly the properties bordering this, or the parcels bordering this property are going to have the view corridor impacts you talked about, or you identified, or some citizens put together. But how do you see the neighborhood being impacted by this development beyond the view corridor issue?
Well, I think the biggest concern was you have one of their major driveways connecting to Phillips right into the shopping center. So certainly, I think if I was a resident of that neighborhood, that would concern me the most. We did have an opportunity to ask the applicant, can you perhaps close that driveway? Maybe it doesn't make as much sense, but as you know, all the properties are connected together, and we just could not get the ownership to agree to that. So I think there's a benefit here in reducing the trips. But overall, I guess to touch on the height requirement, we still have the potential for a 36-foot building on top of the hill. So that will certainly affect people's views more to the north of the site.
What do you mean on top of the hill?
Let me show you.
And while you're doing that, but if they're turning in, if there's traffic going into that driveway off Phillips, I'm not sure I understand how that's going to negatively impact the neighborhood. Because presumably they're coming from County Line and turning north?
I don't know if somebody might find it a more convenient way to get back over to Broadway, cutting through the Oak Brook neighborhood. It would be a circuitous route, but...
I see. Okay.
So directly north of this site is what was Courtesy Ford. It's now it's another Ford dealership, but they AutoNation Ford. But again, they still have a potential in that green spot to the north of the site to build a 36-foot tall building. Now, this is 20 feet above the site we're looking at. So if there is a height requirement that's going to impact the neighborhood, I think that would be the site to be most concerned. And as I mentioned, standing on Phillips, looking at this building, you're looking at a 30-foot edifice, basically.
All right.
So it's not a whole lot different than the neighborhood.
But theoretically, that back parcel, which we're not actually all that concerned about at the moment, somebody could put an office building in there and it's already zoned up for 41, right? Or 51. Is that what you said?
No, 36 feet. Now, that's a flat site, so that extra 10 feet would not go into
Okay, but
play.
I thought you said the PDC had it originally. Did they change that?
Yes, it was 50 stories. It was, we did it again. 50 feet. It's now 36 feet on that site.
Okay, but they could do that without coming to planning board, council. They could just do it.
Right, that'd be a staff approval. Right.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And you said, I think it said in the council memoranda that the height of the old Safeway facade was roughly 36 feet. Is that that's at the same elevation as this parcel?
I'm not sure. I would say it's not. It's probably lower if you look at this. If you look at this top exhibit, you can see how the site in general, if you cut it horizontally, is going up. So the Safeway building is actually lower than this particular site.
Okay. Now go back to the height exhibit that you just flashed by there, that one. So just so I understand this, if we're talking, I get that the 41 feet could technically be 51. So essentially what we're dealing with here is case B.
Right.
Is that accurate?
Exactly.
Okay. So is it accurate to say that even if it's a 51-foot building at the top, at grade at the top, which is more or less on level with the neighborhood, it's still basically 41, or from planning board 36. So I mean, is that an accurate statement? It's 36 feet if you're at Phillips, and 46 feet if you go from the front door.
I would say if you're looking at the front door, what's proposed 51 feet. So you're standing at the front door, you're looking up at a 51-foot building.
Okay, so what is it if I'm standing on Phillips?
It's about 31 feet. Because
so
there's 20 feet difference between the front door and up on Phillips.
Okay, so when we talk about, and you touched on it, and I want to be real clear on this point because I think it's sort of important. The code 10-2-23, A and predominantly B, talks about a PDC having to be in conformance with B2, and if it's not, but then it also references this 10-2-23 sub D section, sub 2B, which basically says if you're within 150 feet of a property line, you can't go over 30 feet. So the 30 feet in this instance starts where? From the front door?
So the 30 feet, if you see the all the way to the right corner of the building, and what we've shown here is that is 80 feet from the. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But what I'm asking is, and I know where you're going to go, but because this is going to be entertaining. The 30, I want to know where the 30-foot limitation that's in the zoning code starts from somewhere. And if I'm understanding what you're saying when you showed that height thing, I kind of I'm interpreting that as saying that it's 30 foot from the front door, which is at the bottom of the hill. On that case B example, is that where you would say the 30 foot? If I can go up 30 foot, if that's the limitation, and we'll talk about why it's the limitation in a minute, maybe. But is that 30 foot starting from the front door, or is it starting from the top of the hill?
And you're talking about the required height of 30 feet.
On a PDC, if it's subject to 10-2-23 sub D.
It would be 40 feet.
I am still confused, but yes, the 30 feet would be from ground level unless you're in exhibit or case B, which allows that change in elevation.
Okay.
Now, that 30 feet limitation in this case is to the right of that vertical line that's at the corner of their building. So anything within that area could have that 30 feet. It has to be limited to 30 feet.
Okay, so the issue there is that if the property is within 150 feet of the residential boundary, then it can't be more than 30 foot according to the zoning code.
The building, right. Correct.
But, so the first question is that 150 feet, does any part of it constitute all of it, or does the whole thing have to be within 150 feet? So are you saying if just that corner is within 150 feet, it can be at 30 feet, but everything else could be at 40 feet?
Right. That's how I interpret it. If you're within that 150-foot area, you would that portion of the building would have to be 30 feet tall.
Can I ask the city attorney if that's, are you in agreement with that interpretation?
No, that's not the way I read it, because it says the maximum height of structures located within 150 feet. If it were the way what I'm hearing you say, it would say the maximum height of the portion of the structure that's within 150 feet. So I would say that if it were within that 150 feet, the building height needs to be 30 feet.
The entire
yes.
building, okay. So now the other issue here then is, if I understand this correctly, the corner of that building is exactly 150 feet from the residential boundary. Is that accurate?
That's as accurate as you can get at this scale. That's the intent, yes. That it's outside that 150. So here's the 150-foot line, here's the corner of the building.
And but it's at 150, so the issue then is the interpretation of the code section, the zoning code, which says up to, if it's, and again, I'm going to go to the city attorney for the interpretation of what, because if it says, I think it says, what does it say? It says, where did you go? Here we go.
It says the maximum height of structures located within 150
within
feet
150
of the property boundary.
Yeah.
And staff has interpreted that to mean that it's less than 150, so that 150, which is what it's at, does not trigger that requirement. So, but I have not researched that issue.
Okay.
I think that interpretation is reasonable. If it's a concern for council, my suggestion is that you make it a condition of approval that building be moved to 151 feet. Then it's clearly not triggering that portion of the code.
Okay. Okay. But Glenn, I want to go back again just because I think there's still confusion. Go back to your height exhibit, if you would, and then I'll shut up and let somebody else talk. So if we're dealing with case B and hypothetically you're at the 150-foot limit and you can only go up 30 feet, is it your interpretation that you would then from that lower left-hand corner get 10 feet plus 30 feet, or is the other interpretation, and again, maybe it's Kristen, you need to chime in here, the code, that code section D says 30. It doesn't say 30 plus 10. So how do we interpret the 30 versus 30 plus 10?
So this section is that he's got up on the screen is telling you how to measure the height. And the provision in D2B is telling you what that height can be. So it would be 30 feet from the upper portion of the
corner,
the right side of the triangle. So you would get the additional 10 feet on the left side of the building.
So in theory, it could be 40 feet.
And you'd still comply with this requirement, provided there is that grade that allows you to trigger interpreting the height of the structure under Section B.
Okay. All right. I think I understand that. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay. Councilmember Beckman.
Just a couple questions along the same line. We talked about the building code. What building code was used in 1982, 3, and 4? Were there any differences to what the expectation was at those hearings as to what the heights would be?
Again, our zoning code.
I'm wondering what the discussion might have been at that time.
Right. Yes, and the zoning code referenced the UBC, and I don't know if it actually stated a date. At the time we changed it, 97 was the last UBC, and then we moved to ICC. So that precipitated the change to the code to actually not just reference the building code, but actually put these words into the zoning code.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I think we've been consistent since this project was built on how we measure height.
Okay, if anybody has a different memory, I'd be interested in knowing that. We talked all around this. Could you just tell me again why we chose office or commercial height for this? And can you show me on the plat that portion to the north where that is, which would have been eligible for an office anyway, just for clarification?
So the blue portion, that's the site we're dealing with, that allowed office and or commercial or retail. And that was, and then basically the plan development, you can't read the words, but it says if you have a retail building, that limits the height to 30 feet. If it's an office building, it's 36 feet. Now, to the north, with the original plan, that square that's just below 1998 in the green portion actually allowed a 50-foot building, office building at that site. And then the two smaller squares are one-story office buildings.
Is there a definition somewhere that says that an assisted living facility is residential, is commercial, is office, is whatever?
Yeah. Yes, if you look at Chapter 3 of Title 10, it actually talks about what uses are allowed in what districts, and we group them by residential, commercial, office, and under residential, we have assisted living facilities. So we would consider it residential use.
One more question. Goes to that chart that we were looking at with little triangles on it, and it's the case A and case B. If you could just put that up real quick. If you look at the roof, it's showing a height measurement somewhere halfway between what I would call the eave and the peak. I don't know if that's the correct term. Why?
Yeah. Yeah, I was hoping I didn't have to describe that, but that is another nuance of measuring height, is when you have a pitched roof, it goes to the center of that pitch. It doesn't go to the top. So it creates an average of that width, of that plane of the roof.
So, if we're going to say whatever number we've been saying, 36 or 46, we're going to the halfway distance between the peak and the eave. So we could add, based on some geometric formula, X number more feet to the highest point of the building.
If they, excuse me, if they came in and put a pitched roof on it, and I believe we put in the plan development that basically limited them to a flat roof. So they could not get a 41, 51-foot building and then put a pitched roof on it and get additional height. But
I saw that in one of the alternatives that we have, talking about council might require a flat roof, but if we were to not choose to do that, I wanted to know what the impact of saying not flat but peaked or some kind of slant to it.
And it would be hard for us to estimate what that would be. It would depend on that pitch of the roof, whether it's 412, 512, whatever that is, would determine what that distance is. So I couldn't today estimate what that additional height might be if they did do a pitched roof on the building.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Valdez.
Yeah. Thank you. The measuring height is always a question of the Planning Commission. When I was on it, that halfway point was always an area of contention. And with measuring the height on the starting point, when I look at the drawing that you have before us, so on this one, it has the starting point starting below the building. So why are we starting below the building with measuring point?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why it's showing it that way, but if you read the words, it basically says the lowest point 5 feet out, and perhaps that's why, I think that's why it's showing it where it is you actually go 5 feet out from the face of that building, and then you measure the elevation of the grade.
Does it say 5 feet out? I just recall from the building.
Yeah.
Does it say 5?
It does in the case A. It shows 5 feet.
Right. I'm not talking about in the drawing. I'm talking about in the code.
Okay. Oh, these are the words of the code. So if it doesn't say 5 feet, no, it's not in the code.
So then on the same question, when you go up the hill, it's measuring more than 10 feet away from the building, not at the building.
You're talking about where it shows point B?
Correct.
Again, I think so if you look at A, it says the elevation, I'm trying to read, the elevation of the highest adjoining sidewalk or ground surface within 5 feet of the horizontal distance of the exterior wall. So I believe that's the intent of what B is showing. Even though it doesn't say it under case B, is that showing a point 5 feet out from the face of that building, of that side of the building.
So when somebody measured 150 feet, did they measure right up to the building?
Typically, we go 5 feet out. In this case, because we have greater than a 10-foot distance, it just adds the 10 feet. And we're roughly at 18 feet difference between A and B in this particular site.
Okay. Thank you.
Simple question, I think. Okay. Glenn, the issues before us, I'm going to try and categorize them into 4 so we can kind of confine our discussions when we get to public hearing anyway. One is the use. Assisted living is not currently allowed within a B2, so what's being asked for is use. Mm-hmm. Second is gross square foot area. Look to be increasing because there is a higher height, but if I remember when you talk about the mass of the building, it's not necessarily any greater mass. It may be less mass. It's just going up higher, but that's the square foot is an item of request for variance on that. Third is the item dealing with height, and we have 2 motions before us currently to consider. One would be the 41 feet that's coming as a recommendation from staff, and then from the planning board is a 36-foot height. And then the fourth is a change in the setback area, a greater distance from Phillips than what's provided in there, but that's not necessarily an item of contention as I've read through different documents. So, but those are the 4 questions before us. Is that right?
I think you're accurate, Mayor.
Okay. Council, any additional questions?
Let me ask, I'll just ask one more. And again, this may be a Kristen question. I want to be real, again, just clear. Property owner, absent what's referred to, I guess, as a view corridor easement, where there's a legal right to a view. A given property owner doesn't have a legal claim on the view out their back door. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct. They would need to have received some sort of easement for that. An adjacent property owner basically owns, from the ground down, assuming they haven't severed their mineral interests and granted those rights to someone else, and then they own from the ground level up to what they can reasonably use, right? So airplanes are allowed to fly over, and that's not a violation. But as long as they meet other legal requirements like zoning, they can build up in that area. That's their right. That's what they paid for. That's their property right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. We'll now move to the applicant. And I will ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, while Glenn's doing that. My name is George Swintz. I'm a 34-year resident of the Colorado Front Range. I happen to just get to move to 1810 Highlands Drive in Breckenridge, Colorado. And I'll do the rest of the introductions of who's here with me before I begin, and then I think I might try to answer a couple of your questions before we get too far away from them. Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing us to present what we think is a really exciting plan. And ladies and gentlemen of council, we're happy to be before you this evening. With me is Steve Srsansky, Kathy Ellman, and Steve Elkin, who are the partners behind this assisted living project, as well as Kevin Karras, who is our architect, and Tom Castle, who is the landowner, who can address the sterilization question that we've been talking about the site being vacant for 30 years. Thank you. I'm going to give you these so we can keep moving once I get into it, and I have 7 here for the council and then also for the front desk. lot of very good questions answered already and a very thorough staff report. I will try to keep a cadence and a pace for a very long presentation that you guys have head off several of the issues already in advance. But what I want to do is start this for you and show you what the outline is. You'll see I've got 4 really Roman numerals before we get to questions and answers. So I will show you where I am in my presentation so you can catch the pace of what we're going to do. Looking at the project, we want to hit head on the building height issue. I want to talk a little bit about the economic impact on Littleton. What I've handed out there is going to be referred to, so if you can follow with me when I get to that point, I'm going to tell you that it'll be easier for you to see in the handout than I'm probably on the slide. And we're going to talk about some other community examples. How do other communities handle assisted living uses? It's been told that we have 128 units. We've proposed a 4-story building on 3.3 acres with more than adequate parking. Parking's not been an issue here, but we're meeting city code and not really adjusting the parking that we have on the facility. The vicinity map here shows the H-shaped building on the vacant site, and it also is highlighting 5 houses that you see the green roofs there. This is important to note. In several slides, I'm going to show you how all the way along the Broadway corridor, you've really got commercial uses and then residential uses. There aren't a lot of transitions in Littleton in this Broadway commercial corridor. You can see County Line that was shown at the bottom, and the Safeway Center was at the far left side of the photo. Our site actually goes all the way out. It's actually a long ways away from the shopping center, all the way out to County Line Road. And our property line goes all the way over to East Phillips Drive, where you see the curb cuts. So the yellow represents the site. In this example, we have shown how the site has got roads that go around it on either side. There's a couple of access points into the shopping center on County Line Road, but then there's also the access point that's on Phillips. We did look, as staff had mentioned, about closing the curb cut on Phillips because that was a request that we learned from a couple of neighborhood meetings that we had. And the shopping center owner and tenants were not in favor of that. As you know, seeing retail users, they want more access. They don't want to limit their access. So we weren't able to do that. What we have done is we've tucked the loading into the back of the center. I'm going to pull out a highlighter here, and maybe this will show up behind you. If you turn around and look, the loading area is here. It's depressed below the neighborhood, which is over on this side. This is where staff will park, and then visitors will park out in the front. This green area right here is a water quality pond. And as Glenn had mentioned, there's a lot of trees that we're putting in at the curb cut so that there's some screening for the height of the building. In the next slide, I wanted to highlight, if you turn around again, there's a roadway that goes around the site. So the building sits in here, and the reason that it's where it is because there are easements to get to the shopping center, one for services on the back of the center, and then one the access into the front of the center. At the planning board, we talked about, could we put a building here and a building out here? And the functionality of that is really not smart because there really only needs to be one kitchen afforded. The reason we've gone to a 4-story building is because on the first floor is where all the amenities are. There's lobby, there's staff, marketing offices, there's the director, his office, there's physical therapy, there's a salon, there's a library, there's meeting rooms, there's a TV room, and of course there's a kitchen. There's a full commercial kitchen and a dining area. The dining area opens into a courtyard, which you see inside of the H in our plan. The reason that we need to go to a 4-story height is because there's so much invested on the first floor, and there aren't that many units on the first floor. There are actually on our top floor, pardon me, 30% of the units. So at one point I calculated here that is 38 units When I get to my note, I'll correct it if that's wrong. 38 of the 128 units are on the top floor. It's crucial to have the top floor to afford the amenities that are on the first floor, to afford the staffing levels that we want to have and the quality of the staff that can offer services to Littleton seniors. This next slide is what I call the smack dab in front slide. And what it is a way that the original developer could have put another retail anchor really in a way perpendicular to the neighborhood. You see how it would really be in the face of the Oak Brook neighborhood. Versus, if I go back a couple of slides, you see how the building has a perspective where it's at an angle, which we believe is better than looking at a flat side of the building. The next thing I want to show you are examples of the types of projects that Steve and his team have done. There are several represented here, but this is a project that has been completed in Thornton. Notice that it has a pitched roof on it, which is the preferred roof that we want to use because water runs off of it. Flat roofs are a maintenance issue, so our preference is always to do a pitched roof. Those are three of Thornton. Here's a project that was done in Loveland. I'd point out on this slide that the building is actually lifted up out of the site in this case. In our efforts to accommodate the concerns of the neighborhood's height concerns, we've depressed the building as much as we possibly can. I'm going to talk about height here in a minute. But in this example in Loveland, the building is actually coming up out of the site. Example of the kind of courtyard we do. This is another senior living project that Steve Elkin, one of our partners, has done. This building's actually 8 stories. The only real point here is to tell you that sometimes they're higher than 4 stories. Quickly, and this was referenced in staff report, where we're at, and you probably already knew this, but this is why we're interested in this location, because in Arapahoe County, this graph shows the population of people 65 and older. In the year 2000, there were 40,000 people in that category. 10 years later, in 2010, it's doubled. It's gone up 50% to 60 people, and by 2020, there's nearly 100,000 people in Arapahoe County that are over 65. In the next slide, it shows that your community in Littleton is one of the older populations of all of the neighboring communities there, only trailing Wheat Ridge. And then this last slide on kind of the demographics of what's happening with seniors in Littleton. This drills down all the way to Littleton. In 2015, there were about 9,000 people over 65 in Littleton. By 2020, it's 11,000. By 2030, it's 15,000. That's a lot of people that we need to be providing for senior housing. In our continuum of care, it's important for you to understand that the most intense uses are at the top of the list. When you're close to the end of life, you're using hospice services or a hospital or a nursing home. We are none of those uses. We are memory care, potentially, but all we're doing at the introduction of the project is assisted living, which is just a step above the independent living that a senior has when they are living in their own home. Assisted living provides 3 meals, dressing, bathing, toileting, activities, and a salon on site. So those are the types of things that we're doing there. We also monitor medications. We coordinate doctor visits. We do physical therapy. We have wellness programs. And although the state law does not require it, Mr. Strasansky puts a nurse on staff in the facility of assisted living. So that's number 1 introduction. Number 2, the head-on issue of height. And I'm on the second item, therefore, of my agenda. You see the H part of the building here, and I'm gonna have you turn around because I want to make this point, because later I'm going to refer back to this. At one point, we did talk about leaving this as a 3-story building, and a lot of my references are going to talk about 3 or 4-story buildings versus height, and then I'll come back to the height in actual feet. But one of the suggestions was, instead of having the whole building be 4 stories, that we make this wing, which is further from the neighborhood, transitioning away from the neighborhood, 4 stories, and a 3-story building on this side. What you also see here is an east-west line on either side of the building, west being over here where the mountains are, and the direct impact on the homes that are here, with this home having its view kind of in a southwestern location. Please note that in this corner there's a nursery, so there aren't even homes. It's a commercial use along this line that we're drawing east-west here. There are 3 stars that are going to show you perspective drawings, first on County Line, one from the roof, actually, of the old Safeway, and then over here on Phillips Drive. I'd like to point out that when we're talking about view issues, that I don't think you can cover up our beautiful Front Range. It is impossible to do. It is a long, massive Front Range of mountains. This is the perspective from County Line, where you can see 3 margaritas over in the foreground over here, the 4-story building here, and the shop space that's going over here. This is a 4-story building that does not have a pitched roof on it. This is the same building, 4 stories, flat roof, from the top of the shopping center site, which gives you the perspective back to the east with 3 margaritas as well. And then the perspective of what I'm going to suggest is the progression of where we've been on height here, and for us to attempt as the developer owners to show you what we've tried to do to work with the neighborhood. Remember, the original photographs of the projects that we've done before had pitched roofs on them for the reasons I've cited. So that's what we would have wanted to do, is 4 stories with a pitched roof. We heard the neighborhood says, please go shorter, so we take the roof off and we deal with what we call the interstitial space. Interstitial space is the distance between the ceiling and the floor, between each floor. And that interstitial space is different depending upon whether or not you're moving air through it to heat and cool the units that are below it. So what we did is we went to what we call PTAC units, which are units that are thermostatically controlled in the wall, so we can shrink the interstitial space, and took off the pitched roof. The pitched roof height, and I'm going to show you this in a chart. Actually, if you want to go to the chart, it's the last thing in the handouts that we had there. The top elevation was 58 feet, which is a 4-story building with a pitched roof, 47 feet 8 inches. It was supported by us. We went to a flat roof, which was 51 feet, which was supported by us and by staff. Planning board approved a 46-foot building, which we presumed to be a pitched roof. We went back after the planning board meeting and visited with the neighbors. I've grown to have a great appreciation for Eric and Mary McGlone. We've had many, many dialogues. I went to them and said, what can you support? And they basically said 3 stories, flat roof, which is 37 feet, 8 inches. I suggested, which I'm going to show you in a minute, to Mr. McGlone, that we could do that tiered partial 4th floor as a potential compromise. The compromise being economic and height, not just 4 stories, not just 3 stories, but part 4 and part 5. And basically I was told we won't support anything more than 3-story building, flat roof. So this is an example. If you look at this closely, the part of the building that's closest to the neighborhood is a 3-story building. The part further away is a 4-story building, again with a flat roof. What we have studied since, and this is about to be new information. I got one slide ahead of myself. Let me come back to that in a minute. This is the first graphic that's on the handout. It's been discussed at planning board that the site is flat. The site was not flat. If you look at the light dashed lines on here, it's the original grade of the shopping center in the 1980s. The straight dark lines are the grading plan that was done by the original developer that cut the hill. What I've done for you here is I've highlighted in red the increments of 10 feet. So a 50-foot contour, a 60-foot contour, a 70-foot contour, and all the way up to 76 feet at the curb cut. So before the site was made flat, there was a slope there that was 26 feet. There's no question that this qualifies for the additional 10-foot allowance. Now back to the new point, which is information staff did not have and came out of one more working session that the owners had. This building is a 4-story building with parapets on it. The parapet is just what's above the height of the roof. And architecturally, you'll notice if you look at the buildings around town, you put a different height parapet to give some architectural interest. We've offered and are prepared to do a building that is 48 feet tall without the parapet. When we have looked at the 51-foot building, it was with the parapet. But the parapet, is, if you were to look at it, it doesn't go all the way across at the same height, and in some places there isn't a parapet. The red line would indicate a 48-foot tall building. So not 51-foot request, but 48 feet. Remember, staff approved 51, planning board approved 46. We're here with a 48-foot building asking for this much space, this much of a variance, 2 feet. The other thing that's important to note there is the grade, and actually more so on this one, the top part of that slide, you can see the red line and the shading below, how much of the building is actually into the hill. That is the east elevation, and the east elevation is obviously the one that is facing to the neighborhood. Okay, there's my chart. The conclusion at the bottom was we offered a partial fourth floor with neighborhood saying we can only support a 3-story flat roof, knowing that we had 51 feet approved by staff, 46 feet approved by planning board. We didn't know what to do but to come to you and have you guys help us sort this out. Were you going to grant us what's now a 2-foot variance? And assuming you agree that we get the extra 10-foot allotment, we didn't know how we would want to go below our project that had a pitched roof and it was 46 feet tall. The reason we're back not with a compromise is because we couldn't reach a compromise with the neighborhood. And then lastly on the height, this is another thing that was shown by staff, and what's relative here is over on the far right side of the graphic, and this is in your handout here as well, is that now I'm showing the building at 48 feet. The office building could be 46 feet. There's really no difference in impact on what could be done on the site from the residences. It's been highly stated here that we've got an 80-foot setback. But what I would point out is that, frankly, our building is shorter, and it's on here, it's 6 feet 9 inches shorter than the top of the residence that's across the street. This is a photograph of the street that's behind Phillips. So if you look at the height of the trees, you look at the height of the buildings, with the exception of those 3 or 4 houses, no one's going to see the building because they can't see through their own neighborhood. Third part of my presentation, economic impact. Obviously, there are construction jobs. This project's going to cost over $14 million of material purchases. There's a permanent payroll at a equilibrium. In other words, when we get enough to support the staff with a high enough occupancy so that we don't have 2 staff for 2 residents, but when we get a higher number of residents at stabilization, the payroll's in excess of $2.2 million. When we get to be full, it's in excess of $2.5 million of jobs, people being employed in this facility. There are renters of apartments that are going to be working with us that will come to Littleton to be close to their place of employment. And there's a high population density. There's 128 people that can live there, and there are between the number of shifts. There's 3 shifts during the day, afternoon and evening, but you could have as many as 25 staff on site as well. There's benefits to the existing medical practices, the doctors that are here. There'll be hotel stays when people come to visit. We think that the restaurants in the Oak Brook Shopping Center are really going to benefit from this because folks are going to come take their senior out to lunch, and they're going to go as short a distance as they possibly can. We think that there'll be shopping that they're going to do for their seniors in Littleton. We have heard tonight the site's been passed over for 30 years. It's what I'm saying is not really a retail site. It's not ideal for retail. If you were to be here reviewing a proposal for a bar or a nightclub or a bowling alley, there's a whole lot of other things that are of more intense use that probably have different and maybe more sincere and viable objections than what ours is, a very benign type of use. This will keep all those seniors that we looked at in Littleton, and it's going to draw other seniors from outside of Littleton here and residents and visitors to the folks staying at our facility. Category 4, and this is pretty much done because the 5th one is question and answers. What I've done is I've looked at the 470 corridor, and I've looked at, in your neighborhood, if you will, where do other communities cite this? Maybe it'll be helpful if I point this out. So 470 is running like this in Stonegate, and here's Chambers. So at a major intersection, I've highlighted yellow where others have cited assisted living centers. This is Meridian. So you got 470 and I-25, and Lincoln is the red line at the bottom. Basically, that whole business quadrant, they've recognized this as a commercial type of a use. And I didn't tell you in the introductory comments, but it's very important to be in a high-profile location because 50% of the occupancy in our building comes from people being top of mind. Oh, Mom's getting to the point where she can't live independently. I drive past the Oak Brook Assisted Living Center. I need to stop and find out. Unbelievably, 50% of the occupancy industry-wide comes from drive-bys. So in the Highlands Ranch, 470 is the red line across the top. You can see where Oak Brook is right here. Major intersections of thoroughfares is where Highlands Ranch puts this use. Now look at Littleton. There are 5 sites in Littleton that remain where you can do assisted living. Here's one on Mineral, and here is the Oak Brook Shopping Center is the red asterisk. This is a good place for you to see how if you go north on Broadway, there's all these commercial uses, and then there's a straight line with really no transition, and then there's neighborhoods that are behind it. We can't help the fact that the neighborhood is right in the backyard of the shopping center that has been planned since the 80s. Here's another site on Wadsworth and on Santa Fe. Here's another one on Santa Fe, maybe a little bit concerned about floodplain issues along the river. And then the last one is an R5 site that's on Shepherd, which we wouldn't go on for the reason that I suggested. It doesn't have enough drive-by traffic. Those are the sites that you can do assisted living on in Littleton. We would love to come back and make responses to what the public hearing process here, Mr. Mayor, would address. And if you give me a quick second, I think I have concluded. I will at that point. Thank you very much.
Council questions? Councilmember Stallman?
I'm willing to share. Thank you. When you do this particular slide in the handout, I mean, even if I understand this correctly, even if you do the 37 foot 8 inch flat building, you would still essentially put a large number of trees in there, right, from a buffering perspective, which is is that not going to have the same impact as?
It is, but just in the complete transparency, neighborhood has said we don't really want those trees. It's staff that's requiring the trees because the neighbors realize it's going to block their view. We don't care about the trees on the east side of the building necessarily.
Okay. Is the service road on the north side of the property in use today?
It is.
And so it basically provides trash and delivery
to the back of all the shop space and the furniture and into our facility.
Okay.
Correct. Which is another reason you couldn't close the curb cut, is because the trucks only go one way, and an 18-wheeler has to back in and then keep going out the other direction.
Do you intend to develop the property? Do you intend to operate the facility when it's functional?
Yes. Steve Elkin is the operator,
and
one of the partners.
And so those were the other pictures of facilities that his group operates today? Actually,
Steve did not operate those. Steve Sersonsky and Kathy Elliman and their other partner, Michael Zeitlin, who's not here tonight, operated those facilities.
Okay, but do you want to share Steve's, the operator's credentials a little bit? Or, I mean, I see he's got experience.
Maybe I should let Steve come up and do that.
That'd be fine. While he's coming down, is this a HUD tax credit project?
No.
And what prevents you from grading it lower at the outset? So in other words, you got a 26-foot delta from the bottom to the top of the hill. Why not grade it down another 5 feet and solve the problem?
When you have senior citizens, you want them to come in at grade. We don't want them to have to go down, and we don't want to depress all of their nice public space to basically put it at a garden level. Would be what that would mean. Because of the driveway that comes down, we can't change the elevation of the driveway because it's servicing the shop space that's further to the west. I'll let you answer that.
Okay.
Steve Elkin, 1873 South Bel Air Street, Suite 1105, Denver, Colorado. I manage approximately 2,500 apartment units, of which 800 of them are senior. One project I have in Arvada is 289 units. Another project I have in Denver, which you saw the Springbrook, the 8-story and the 3-story, it's 151 units. I own and manage all of them. I own and manage 125 units in Westminster. I own and manage 114 units outside of Omaha, as well as this potential project as well, too. And then just one other note, just to expand on what was said. When you talk about 128 units and 128 people being serviced for their needs and stuff like that, we also experience about 35 to 40% turnover. So we're actually on a yearly basis probably taking care of about close to 200 people that need the service eventually. Both their family members will live in the area or they will have come from the area. So yes, 5 people or 6 people or 7 people may be immediately affected, but on an annual basis, 200 people will be serviced by this community as well.
That's all I've got.
Other questions from council at this point in time? Councilmember Stein?
Yes, you mentioned Mr. Zeitlin, and we saw in our packet a letter to him. What is his function in this ownership?
Every team needs a numbers guy. He's the numbers guy.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Councilmember Valdez?
So on the partial that you have on here, that would be, on the east end would be 3 stories?
Correct.
And then
the western part of the H would be 4 stories, flat roof.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And we'll,
I do have a question.
Councilmember Cole.
I don't mean to be flip with this, but the comment that was just made about how many you actually serve a whole year, so this is a place you go to die?
No. We like to have very active, healthy seniors there, but it could be that 1 or 2 people have passed away or one person needs care because the other caregiver is needing a respite from that. Clearly, we have shorter and shorter stays. 10 years ago, you might stay for 36 months on average. Now the average is more like 18 months, and the reason is cost of these services are expensive. People stay at home as long as they can, and there's in the last decade been a real cottage industry that started with home health care where seniors are cared for in place. So where you would go to die potentially would be nursing home, hospice.
Okay, so this is like a temporary need.
Oh, sure. Didn't know you're still here.
Let me expand if I can. When I've talked about the turnover, for different reasons, people will leave our community. Sometimes it'll be economic reasons. Sometimes it'll be that their children will move out of the area and they'll go to another place where their children are. Sometimes they'll have to go to a nursing home because their level of care will be a lot higher than what we can provide. So there's numerous reasons why you have vacancies at assisted living communities. But the assisted living community turnover isn't turnover. The smallest percent, I wouldn't say the smallest percent, one of the smallest percentages is because of death. The largest one is because they need additional skilled care or they need additional staffing needs. And probably the second most is either usually a child has moved out of state or for economic reasons. Believe it or not, there's actually a decent amount of times when parents actually have to help out grown children with a home, and they actually leave our communities to go live in that home because that child or that in-law is actually taking care of the parents in exchange for helping them buy a home or live in a home.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I get one? Let me ask.
Okay.
Very, very quickly. We talked during the staff presentation about this 150-foot distance from the structure to the residential boundary. And I'm assuming you're familiar with that concept.
I meant to answer that question for you when I first got started, but yes.
Okay, so I guess the ultimate question is going to be, what latitude do you have to reconfigure the property in a material way to address that issue? I'm not talking about 6 inches.
Sure. Because it really is inches that we've been talking about with neighborhood, with height and so forth. And I think that the regulation says that if it's within 150 feet, meaning if you're outside of 150 feet, you're outside of it. We've got very sophisticated surveying instruments. We can determine whether or not we're outside of the 150 feet. If we're not, if it requires us to move it 6 inches or 12 inches or 18 inches, it's easy enough to do that. So we would commit to do that. We can cut off a corner of the building if we had to do that.
Could you orient it enough to make it reasonably a bigger difference? I mean, I guess what I want to do here is, the question I guess I'm asking is, I'm not sure 150 feet, 1 inch is necessarily the intent of what was in the code. The code is what it is, and I get that it says 150. But I think if you look at the spirit of the thing, which sort of we have to do, I think, at some level, in interpreting this, weighing the evidence, as it were, how would you move it 10 feet, hypothetically, to really resolve that issue?
The slide that I showed about the site constraints is what we're dealing with, because we've got a retail shopping center along one property line, and we've got a driveway that goes all the way around it. So there really isn't any way to orient the building in an efficient way, because you want to do rectangular wings. They're least expensive to build. They're most efficient from the inside. The only way to do it is to pull it this way, which shrinks quite a large amount of the building versus taking off a portion of the building. I understand, but I don't know that if we moved it 10 feet, it would really make any difference.
Well, and from a visual perspective, from a view corridor, I'm not inclined to disagree, but from a code perspective, that might be a different issue.
Okay.
But what's involved with modifying the easement? Because, I mean, once you get into that south side of the driveway there, I don't want to solve the problem. I guess what I'm trying to do is just figure out if conceptually there is a way around. I mean, if the easement is there because you want people driving into the shopping center and the street got pushed a little bit this way and you still had the easement, is that a shopping center issue, or is that a city issue, or whose issue is that?
I think it's a shopping center issue, but staff can comment. The front of the, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to put your eyes out here, but the the side of the shopping center is here, and what the shopping center users always want to do is have the driveway right in front of it, because the perception in the shopper is that I'm going to find a parking space close to the front. And if the driveway is close to the front, you know, they think that they can do that. And we went to the shopping center owners, a group called Noddle, and Noddle said, absolutely not, we're not closing any curb cuts, and absolutely not, we don't want to change the driveway easement. It's been there since the 80s, and it impacts them in a negative way.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Yep,
okay.
Understand.
Mr. Mayor, are you done with me? Oh. Okay, this is Kevin Karras, our architect. Quickly, I think they want to go on.
Okay. Kevin Karras, 2525 South Wadsworth, Lee Architects, Denver, Colorado. Just throw a couple of technical points out here. About the easements and the roadway, there's a 12-inch water main running down the southwest and the southeast road up there. So we'd have to basically remove the water and relocate that. So that, plus it's open utility easement, so gas and electric also run in that same easement. So that's why we're landlocked there. And then we've assured the owner that we're outside of that 150-foot demarcation away from the neighbors. So we've made sure that we've stayed outside that boundary, so we wouldn't have that issue. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Council, I have a request for a short break. We'll reconvene at 8:35 and open the public hearing. Okay, Council, we have 18 on the roster for this evening. Some have indicated they're not interested in speaking, and some have not indicated a yes or no on wishing to speak. So I will work with the yeses, not call on anyone that said no, but if you didn't indicate, I'll also call your name. I will do this. I'll call the first person and then one on deck, and then as we move through the list, so that whoever is the next to speak has the opportunity to at least have a little bit of advance warning. First up is Paul Bingham, and then on deck is Kathy Burns. And we're opening the public hearing at 8:35 p.m. Thank you, Paul.
Good evening again, Council. Paul Bingham, 236 West Delaware Circle in Littleton. I'll try this again. Happy Hanukkah, happy Merry Christmas, etc. Councilor Stallman's right. This thing has been vacant for a long time, and it would certainly be good to have something in there. That shopping center desperately needs something. And per Mayor Sinanik's instruction, I won't go through a bunch of these other points that are pretty well taken care of. When I signed up to talk, I was pretty set on recommending that this thing was all settled at the end of the planning board meeting, which I also attended, and I thought that was it, and I was surprised tonight when it's all up in the air again over the height issue. And really think, bottom line, I would request that you folks table this or do something so there's a little bit of time to work through the that neat chart that the developer has supplied with all the different options, and maybe take enough time to not just force what might be a little bit arbitrary decision. So anyway, if you can table it, it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Kathy Burns, and then Tom Castle. Good evening, Kathy.
Good morning. Good evening, council members. I don't do this, so bear with me. I agree with the previous gentleman that I think this would be a good idea to table this because there seem to be a whole lot of smoke and mirrors going on tonight. You're being shown diagrams from 1984 of this property that sloped. It does not slope like that anymore. It's been graded. So that is deceptive, and I implore you to please come and look at this property. On these diagrams, it looks like it's a huge lot where you can build a monstrosity of this proportion. It's not. It's going to go way, way high, and that is the objection. This is not about just a couple of homes who are going to have their property views destroyed. It's not about that. I think that's been lost in translation. The issue is that Oak Brook does not want this in our community. If you're going to service 200 more people in this little tiny property, we are going to have massive traffic. And they're going to come in on that road on Phillips. They're not going to go down by the Burger King. They will come in on Phillips and take that little road that goes down that slope. That's where the majority of the traffic will come, which is right behind several of these Oak Brook homeowners. It doesn't affect just 5 or 6 homes on that back up to that property. It affects a whole lot of us. I don't back up to that property. I have lived next to an assisted living facility in Pasadena while I was working out of state. The other issue is in living next to that, you are going to have paramedics and fire trucks coming at any time of the day or night. And that is another issue. Summertime, when we leave our windows open to get the fresh air, that's what we're going to be woken up to. And I guarantee you, this does happen because I live next to it. To insist that we, including myself, the aging population of Oak Brook, are going to want this facility, I guarantee you, the ones of us who are against it, and there's close to 100 people who have protested this just in the immediate vicinity, I am not going to go to a shopping center when I need assisted living. There's going to be a tiny little courtyard that these people can wheel themselves out into and look at that sloped wall. That's all they're going to have to look at, unless they're one of the fortunate ones that get to sit up on the 4th story with their beautiful views of the mountains. So for that reason, this is not the right place for this. I am not, as a senior, I'm not going to live in a shopping center and wheel my wheelchair or my little walker or whatever it is around a shopping center. I want some place like what you have up off of just south of Arapahoe on Broadway, the beautiful memory care center that exists there. That is the type of facility that I would look for. I will not look for a shopping center facility. And I know I speak for many, many other Oak Brook homeowners. There are other facilities that are close to us. There's Windcrest that's just right down the road on County Line Road that is a senior facility. So to say that these facilities don't exist, there are many other properties and places where this could go rather than in this tiny little shopping area. So again, I would implore you to come and look at this site. It is not a sloping site, and based on the diagrams you're showing, if your credenza here is the entire building, they're building one little piece that's as big as your little red cup into the building in order to qualify for a slope site. And to me, that's dirty tactics on the part of the builder, and it smacks of arrogance in the face of all of us who do not want this. As far as the height, we are not opposed to having development here. But we don't want a residential facility built in a shopping center where you have 200 people and massive traffic and paramedics and fire trucks coming any and all time of the day. You would not want this in your backyard either.
Thank you, Kathy.
On a final note, I'd just like to say my friend Snay, who walks up to that corner every day, she does that because it's her last memory that when she walked with her son, who is deceased in the World Trade Center.
Kathy.
Her view will be destroyed.
Tom Castle and Janet Isaac.
Good evening. My name's Tom Castle. My address is 2761 Kendrick Street in Golden, Colorado. My wife and I have owned the property for a little over 20 years now. And I'm also the president of Sullivan Hayes Brokerage Corporation here in Colorado. And we like to think of ourselves as pretty good at retail. And we have exhausted an enormous amount of effort trying to attract a retail user to this site. The focus and attention of junior anchors And people that are looking for that size of space have moved to more regional locations, which you've accommodated in other areas around your community. We have not been successful. We think this is a wonderful use for the property, and we certainly hope you all can support the opportunity to put something in a parcel that's been vacant since the Safeway was developed 30-some years ago. Happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate y'all's time.
This is the property owner. Any questions from council? Okay. Tom, thank you for taking the time. Janet Isaac and Jeff Isaac. And then, Jeff, if you're coming forward, David Klinger will be next.
Hi, Council. I'm Jeff Isaacs. I live right there along Phillips, alongside of Eric, Alan, Jim, everybody. One of the biggest concerns I have, along with the height, is traffic. I don't know how often you guys ever get on County Line Road, but obviously, it parallels 470. Everybody hates 470 during rush hour. County Line now is worse than 470. There is no traffic control whatsoever there. And it's going to increase. It's going to get worse. More traffic is going to be on Phillips, just like they're talking about up and down the hill. It's just not practical. The tax money from Douglas County, wasn't it said, was spent? And they didn't have the traffic lights put in? No, I'm sorry. You remember that?
Sir, we need you to speak in the microphone and address the council during public.
Okay, I apologize. There was talk about the traffic lights there to be put in, and then the funding was lost because Douglas County and Arapahoe County dispersed the funds elsewhere. So there's no traffic management whatsoever at Phillips and County Line, and it's just going to increase the traffic flow. So I'm opposed to it big time. That's it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Happy holidays.
Thanks. Happy holidays. David Klinger and Jim Peterson on deck. David Klinger.
She's handing him out.
Is this on?
Yes. You can see it.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is David Klinger, 21759 Cabrini Boulevard, Golden. I've been a land planner for over 40 years. I have over 300,000 people living in my projects, and I have never seen such a poor site plan in my career. This building is far too big for this site. I'm going to show you, if I can, how they have manipulated the staff into getting this additional 10-foot of entitlement. First of all, though, in 1983, when this shopping center was under consideration, the city approved a site development plan. This was recorded, went through planning staff and city council, and it indicated here, as you can see, that this site was supposed to be a one-story commercial with a maximum building height of 30 feet. This is not an office building, so they're manipulating and using that as a base of 36, but it was approved for 30 feet. And in your packet, you have one of the best architects in the city of Denver, Al Calusi, which states that this is a business. This is a commercial building. So again, this was proposed and approved by the city, and the neighbors relied on it. If you go to your package on the next item, I'm going to skip number 2 and go to 3 because of time constraints. You can see that this is not a sloping site. This is a flat site, and there's an abrupt slope on the east. The developer has misled the staff and saying this is a sloping site. This was graded 30 years ago, and this is the existing grade, with 95% being flat and a slope. They have oversized this building and jammed the building into this little slope, and therefore they've manipulated the staff. They have shown an existing grade like this. It's not there, it's here. And so this building is oversized for the site, and to get the 10-foot entitlement, they've actually just jammed it into this little slope to call it a sloping site. This is the height of or the shape of the building, and you can see how it's jammed into the slope. If the building was smaller and fit the existing site, which is graded, then it would be a 30-foot flat site, a 30-foot high building. There wouldn't be any of this sloping thing that has confused everybody. This is a gross misrepresentation of, to manipulate the staff into saying this is a sloping site. It's not. And in accordance with the approved site development plan, this building, which was promised to the neighbors, should be a 30-foot high building on a flat site. You know, over the years, I've noticed that Littleton has a history of good planning. Your downtown is a beautiful area. The city hall fits well with the surrounding area. The South Park office buildings complement the sites. But this project does not. This poor site planning and oversizing of this massive structure, to my opinion, my professional opinion, violates everything that I have been taught in site planning. And I ask you, I implore you, do not approve this poor site plan and this manipulation of this building into the site to get that 10-foot additional height. In short, this building is too long for the existing site, and it requires retaining walls around it to accommodate the slope, and there's going to be big retaining walls here, 350 feet long, with no man's land in back here. So basically, in summary, I want to say that this is too big a building for too small a site, and I think you as a city council should uphold what was promised these people. It's going to devalue their homes. As you can see with this photo here, it completely blocks all the views. This is, in my opinion, a manipulation of
Thank you, David.
Putting too big a building on the site. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry I don't have more time, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Jim Peterson, then Carol Fay.
Good evening. Jim Peterson, 507 East Phillips Drive North. I'm one of the houses that you've seen in the sites. I'm totally opposed to this. I actually sent an email out to all of you, made my views very clear on this particular location, how it's been an underperforming location for 30 plus years. When I purchased my home, I've been in the home 28. One of my main decisions was the actual site and the retail space behind me as far as the restrictions on the height. I'm not going to take any more of the council's time other than I'm fully opposed to this. I'm not opposed to the idea of a assisted living facility in Littleton, not at all. I am in the food service industry and have been for 28 years. I service facilities like that. There's been a lot of smoke and mirrors, which I've been witnessing, and it's extremely disappointing. And I applaud to you, council, to see through all that and see what they're truly proposing and the hairs they are splitting, and come to the proper decision for the community. Thank you for your time. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Jim. Carol Fay. And on deck, Paul Boehm, B-O-E-H-M.
My name is Carol Fay. My address is 759 East Phillips Drive South. I've lived in Oak Brook for 27 years, and I do not back up to that proposed construction at all. I live in a different part of Oak Brook The effect that having that proposed building, though, on the neighborhood is of having a wall be constructed, a tall wall. And I'm not talking necessarily about obstructing a view, I'm talking about having that feeling of being walled in. The other buildings in that shopping center are low and down from the neighborhood. This one proposes to be sticking up. It makes me have that feeling of a sore thumb, that it's something that doesn't quite belong. And from the paperwork that comes from years ago, as it's designed now, doesn't belong where it's going to be put. I remember how that piece of property was when I moved into my house in 1987. And it was significantly changed since then. They brought in excavators and flattened out the property and made it, instead of a nice gentle slope, into a fairly steep one, abruptly from Phillips Avenue. One of the reasons I remember is because my kids were so excited because it went from useless to a sledding hill. It goes down very abruptly from Phillips Avenue down to the flat part. So the things that we've been shown about the elevation of the property is old information. It is quite different now. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Paul, and then Kathy Kennedy Tookfield.
Good evening. My name is Paul Bohm. My residence is 5657 South Forest Hill in Littleton. I am one of the tenants in the current retail facility, and I guess my own personal concerns, I have some ambivalence. We live in a free market society and should not deny anyone the right to make a profit, to make a living. I have lived beside this empty lot for some time, and it's been in a very poor state of maintenance. No offense meant, but it's a four-wheeling mud hole. It has destroyed some of the paving that was originally there as people were four-wheeling over it. It would have a direct impact on my business, not only from parking. I'm not sure it was a positive comment that in shopping centers they want to have the perception of a front row seat to park. My clients in a small animal hospital carry their pets, and having to move a number of spaces out would be a hardship for them. And I know parking is a small issue, but it dramatically impacts my business. The parking spaces that have been allotted where my staff, where the people that work in the DMV work, will be completely displaced and have to park out in front where now there's space for clients and customers. So I'm concerned that an equitable compromise, the fact that a worse scenario with more parking for retail, I think is a legitimate concern, but with the existing facility, it will put a hardship on those tenants that are in the shopping center as it exists now, because people will have to go quite a bit further out. And I personally am concerned about the impact. I've watched Broadway and Littleton Boulevard, and I have great sympathy for the real estate, the businesses that are there and the impact that their business has had for the last year as that goes through construction. And I see that impact happening to the retailers that are currently in that shopping center. So I would ask you to consider very carefully the impact of existing as well as future. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Kathy Kennedy Tookfield, and then Alan Trentfeld. Does that sound right?
Good evening. I'm Kathy Kennedy Tuckfeld, and my address is 527 East Phillips Drive North. And you got to see the backside of my house. I'm right smack dab in the middle of all this chaos. And I'm going to ask you to indulge me just a tad because I need to tell you a little bit about how this impacts my family. This is our backyard we're talking about. And the reason it becomes such an incredible concern for us is we have a child with significant cognitive disabilities. When a building of this proportion comes in and we bring in the construction and all of the people that are going to live there and pass through there, it widens the vigilance that I as a mother need to take for my child. It also takes away his backyard. I cannot have him out there with 150 feet of discrepancy between us without me being present. So it changes my life dramatically. Now, I realize that's not a city concern, but it was a concern for me when we purchased our home. And we went in the face of what was in place, and there was an agreement, and we were under the assumption that if it was built, it would be retail. In our experience, and in our experience living in our current neighborhood, there is retail, and most of them are closed in the evening. Yes, Trace Margaritas is open, but they are further away from us, and it doesn't really impact us. However, putting this literally where people will be viewing our house from this facility, being able to view my son, who will not understand that people are viewing him, will be of great privacy, great security, and great concern to this family. And we moved in knowing that there would not be something that would be able to trump and give that amount of view and lack of privacy to our family. And right now, having the fence there, when people come by, they don't see into our backyard. They can't just stand there unless they're taller. So we've come to talking about all of these heights. Well, the height that I'm bringing to you is 5'11", 185 pounds, of a young man who does not function in a world without need for security. And I am asking you to significantly consider the impact that this will have, considering the driveway that they are not going to close off is literally my backyard. And the amount of people that are coming through there is of grave concern to us. I also want to know, I also need to tell you one more thing about myself. I'm a first grade teacher. So being fair and following rules is very, very important to me. I live my life conveying it to our future of America. So I am asking you why someone who unfortunately bought a property that has turned out to be a lemon for selling it for the purpose that it is zoned for is now granted a greater right than me, who looked at what was zoned for, made decisions based on that, and would like it to be held to the contract that is currently in the works, or currently in play. And I don't understand why they can come in and be flippant about, well, this height, that height. Well, it's more than just height. It's not just views. And I also wanted to mention to you that none of them have ever spoken to me. I am the house right behind the driveway. I am accessible. They have not come to find out what my concerns are. I am completely 100% opposed to this facility taking the rights of our neighborhood away from us and granting rights to someone who has a 30-year-old lemon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kathy. Alan?
She said it exactly the way I wanted it.
Okay. Thank you. Steve Elkin, do you want to speak at this point in time? And then I'll just mention Mary McClone is on deck. Go ahead, Steve.
I'll make it short. I don't have to repeat my address or any of that stuff again, do I?
We've got it.
But any event, I just really want to address the issue of just changes in general, changes in healthcare, changes in everything, but mainly changes in real estate. When I was growing up, movie theaters were always by themselves, had their own parking lot. Things were different. Now you see movie theaters being anchors of shopping centers. When I was growing up, you had hospitals and hospital campuses only. Now you have hospitals that always have medical buildings connected to it. So things evolve. You see the VA, the Fitzsimmons VA campus. It's an amazing thing. You never saw mutual sharing of facilities and things of that nature. Your perfect example is the way Streets of South Glen turned out. Well, that's a change. Things do change. You see churches in shopping centers now. The whole industry, the whole development world has changed. Mr. Klinger, in due respect, he's done a great job of increasing densities. A lot of his patio home developments, a lot of his townhome developments that at times were just zone single family. He brought to the attention of those cities and those neighbors how it's good to have a diversity of housing. So things evolve. When I was growing up, there weren't townhomes or patio homes. There were some rental apartments that were townhomes, but people weren't living in patio homes or for sale homes with walls around, things like that. So the whole industry of real estate has also changed, not just healthcare and just how they interact. So I guess that's about it, just to kind of point out that people say, well, it doesn't belong in a shopping center, or it doesn't belong there, or a car dealership doesn't belong here. I never saw multi-story parking structures in auto dealerships and things like that, but quite honestly, it looks better. It's much better. I would much rather see a 3-story parking structure in a car dealership than an additional 5 acres of asphalt and parking cars. So things change. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Mary, and then Carol Brizak.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mary McClone. I live at 517 East Phillips Drive, right behind this proposed development. My husband and I are original owners and residents of Oak Brook. We are active and loyal citizens of Littleton and the community. We bought our house in 1982, completely aware that at some point the land behind us would be developed. We welcomed the collaborative efforts of the city, the developer, and the neighbors, and we negotiated in good faith a PD plan that would meet the needs of the residents and the retail center. Have times changed? Of course they have. Have the objectives written into the site development plan changed? No, they have not. Indeed, the agreed upon objectives were outlined so specifically to ensure their commitment over time. Tonight, I'd like to talk to you on behalf of the Oak Brook neighborhood, specifically the 97 neighbors that signed the protest. So when you see me, see 97, okay? 97 of us, plus those guys. Okay, so as original owners, my husband and I were at the table for these good faith negotiations, the only one in this room tonight that were at the table. The PD plan was developed to meet both the needs of the retail space and maintain the quality of the neighborhood. One of the major objectives was to evolve the development of this project is the desire to be sensitive to the adjacent neighborhood. Concern is critical, and parcel 1A and B is designed to gradually increase as you move away. In 2014, the city was presented with a proposal to build a 4-story assisted living center in the shopping center, not aligning with the existing PD plan. In fact, the proposed development asks for significant variances. The building height is an increase of 70%. The square footage is an increase of 77%. On August 12th, the city staff began to review the proposal. The technical review committee, and you'll have that in a minute, but here it is. The technical review committee reviewed it and recognized that this development is not appropriate for the site. There at the bottom. The primary concern with the requested PD plan modifications is that the additional height together with additional square footage would be out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood. Staff does not find justification for the height modification at this time and is not supportive of the request. At the November 10th Planning Board meeting, the city staff chose to support the project, although their technical review committee did not support the project. The Planning Board recognized the covenant agreement between the city and the neighborhood with the existing PD plan and forwards a recommendation of reduced height. These are quotes from the Planning Board meeting. Andrew Graham, if I have a contract with the city on the land behind my house, I expect the contract to be honored. I'm going to let you read the other ones as my time is limited, but I think it's important to note that they directly recognized and respected the agreement of the PD plan. So tonight I'd like you to consider these important points from all 97 plus of us in my neighborhood. The existing PD plan language is still binding. It serves as a covenant between the city and its neighbors. Homes were purchased and approved upon based on this agreement. In fact, the city's technical review committee and the planning board support this position. The view corridor that you spoke of is protected simply by the zoning requirement of 30 feet. The developer is asking for an 18-foot variance on this 30-foot requirement. The proposed development is just too big for this site. It represents 77% increase in square footage and a 70% increase in height, using a 10-foot entitlement for a sloped site that really is 95% flat. In fact, it could be moved just a few feet and not invoke the entitlement at all. This development will dominate the landscape and the skyscape in the area and is in violation of the existing agreement to the detriment of the neighborhood. I'd like to also note that we did talk to George a number of times, but could never reach or find common ground. In short, we expect you, as did the Technical Review Committee and the Planning Board, to recognize and respect this agreement with the Oak Brook neighborhood and use your vote tonight to represent us, all 97 plus of us. I don't think we should accept this particular plan before us just because it could be worse, as the developer has stated. And I welcome any questions. It's tough with 4 minutes when they had over 40. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Carol? Please withhold any comment. Applause.
Carol Brazak, I live in the 4th District. I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't live over there. I have lots of friends that live there. But in just listening to the conversation tonight, it reminds me of sitting in this chamber when Broadstone was being discussed, when Walmart was being discussed, and when Littleton Village was being discussed. In fact, it was Lowe's before it was Littleton Village. And we know Walmart didn't fit. It was putting a big piece of property on a big building on a small piece of property, and there was some wisdom in the room that night, and Walmart didn't come forward. There was some talk about putting a solar farm there, and thank God that didn't happen. And now look what we have. Breckenridge Brewery and Designs by Sundown are developing there. So, we waited, and we got a good project. Broadstone, we're still waiting. They tried to use the same argument that somebody could come on and build in by right, and it could be worse than what they were presenting. But intimidation doesn't work. Let's wait and do something that makes sense. The other issue, there was a comment by Glenn that the supermajority approval of this does not apply because you didn't get the 20% in the protest. But the other element of that charter change that we made last year said that if the planning board didn't forward you a project that they approved, then you could not support it without a supermajority. So I would say that anything over 36 feet is not going to be supported by a 4-3 vote of this council. It would need to be supported by a 5-2. So I would like to hear you discuss how that element of the charter change that was not brought up to you tonight impacts the decision you're making. It, I guess, depend on what the motion that gets presented at what height. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. That concludes the roster for this evening. We have another approaching. Marty?
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Marty Brazak. I live in District 4. I'm a little confused about the process, and Jerry, maybe you can help me. You've been on the planning board. If the planning board makes a recommendation, and then subsequent to that recommendation, it's brought to the council, and it's changed, doesn't it have to go back to the planning board because the developer presented plenty of options, and in addition to what the planning board recommended, does it have to go back to the planning board?
I'll leave that for the attorney to answer.
Okay. City manager, does that have to go back to the planning board?
This is time for your comments, Marty. This is time for your comments.
It's over? Do I get an answer?
You may or you may not. It's time for your comments, not your inquiries. Okay. Thank you. Again, that concludes the public hearing roster. Seeing no one else approach, we now turn it back to the applicant.
Thank you.
Oh, and the public hearing is closed at 9:13 p.m.
Just a second. I need to go to the, I want to go to the last slide. So. But I can go back from there. I'm wanting to avoid some of the attacks on that project a little bit and try to find a way to defend it from the perspective of what does make sense for the city of Littleton. There are, Helene, my slide's not up there. Is there something more I have to do? There we go. These are not in any particular order because there were a lot of issues that were addressed, but I did have a few things that I want to say just as parting thoughts. When the original developer developed this site, they could have orientated this particular part of the end of the property to Phillips Drive and not have cut out the site. In fact, they could have filled the site, so the building would have been at a higher elevation. It's I think preferable that we've got the building at an oblique angle versus square, so I think that there was some intentionality and intent of what they had done. We've talked about why is retail at 30 feet, why is office at 36 feet. I believe the intent of that is that retail is a more intensive use, office is a less intense use, assisted living is even a lesser intense use. If you want to lump it into, is it a 30-foot intensity or a 36-foot intensity, I think you really have to argue that is a very low use for the site. We're not dealing with a brewery that's going to have drunk drivers leaving from it. We're dealing with senior citizens that very few of them are going to drive. There's very little traffic. Any other use that would go on this site will have more traffic than our use. It's just hands down, the traffic study says that. It was suggested that the building would be done in a smaller scale. If I'm taking units out of the top floor or I'm shrinking the building, clearly when you shrink the building, it makes the project unviable. I don't think you want to do that for the seniors that are in Littleton. I don't feel as though we've heard anything from neighborhood about a compromise. We've said, okay, we don't want to do our pitch roof, we'll do 4 stories. We'll do a partial 4th floor. All we've heard, we haven't even heard that they want to do anything more than 30 feet. They don't want it to happen, and I can understand that. For 25 years, it's been a park setting there. When you walked your dog or when you strolled there, you had a beautiful view. I don't think that it's fair for you to consider stopping a commercial use on a commercially zoned site when we've already talked tonight there aren't rights to views. There isn't a right to the view that theoretically needs to be protected for the neighborhood. There was concern about amount of ambulances. There's 1 trash truck and there's about 4 ambulance visits in a month. It isn't an acute use like we have talked about. I hadn't seen these photos until just a second ago, but pardon the term shell game as you're who's presenting the issue in a certain way, but I think those photographs are zoomed in on the site and Clearly, one of them is taken from the second floor bedroom level, which is where the McClone's deck is, but it's the second floor bedroom level, and I don't think it's a real fair comparison of our project. This project will generate, staff has estimated $192,000 in impact fees. The value of this project is going to be over $15 million. There's going to be great taxes that will be paid on it. The construction will take 11 months. If something gets built there, it's going to take a certain period of time. We'll be working with the neighborhood and with the shopkeepers and so forth to make sure that this is minimal of a construction impact on them as possible, but construction's coming on this site at some point or another. We moved the water quality pond away from the shopping center because we're hearing the need for parking spaces right up front. So the green site that I talked to you about was moved away from the building so that there are as many parking spaces as close to Paul's veterinarian operation as possible. We think that we have a good building to look at instead of looking at the back of a retail center. Frankly, a lot of our residents have pets. That can help even a vet. There was a right to a 50-foot building on this site at one point, and clearly we are below that. You've got a lot of hot topics right now on urban renewal. This center has the opportunity of getting a shot in the arm by our use going into it and head off any issues that might happen with greater vacancies that would happen in the center. The shop owners, with the exception of Paul, don't want to speak. I've tried to get them to speak. They don't want to speak in favor of this, but they're largely silent because their customers are the people that are here objecting to it. They can't speak in favor of this. They don't want to lose their customers. The shopping center owner is in favor of it. And in conclusion, there's probably more thoughts, but what I wanted to leave you with is that we've worked on this project for 12 months. We've asked and asked again from staff. Staff said, this is how you measure the building. Clearly, I showed you with all my red lines, this site had a lot of slope on it, and the allowance for the 10 feet, you would basically have to rewrite the code or the law today to say, you can't interpret it that way. That's the way staff told us to interpret it. We've invested $200,000 on the project based on getting it to this point on what the staff has told us was the way you're supposed to interpret the measurement of the building. We've offered compromise. We haven't been able to reach a compromise. We're here to ask for a 2-foot variance. That's my closing comments. Any other questions, Mr. Mayor, members of council?
Questions? Seeing none at this point in time.
Thank you,
George. Council, now time for our discussion and or a motion.
I have a question, discussion. Sure. I would like to address the issue of the council vote on something that was not approved by the planning board, and now it is before council.
So I just want to clarify, the planning board did forward a favorable recommendation to you. If you look at the resolution, it says in section 3, the planning board does hereby forward a recommendation of approval to the city council. The charter provision at issue, let me find it, requires the supermajority vote if the planning board has not recommended a favorable vote for the zoning change. So it's not triggered.
And I understand that in the council communication we have some sample motions, and those would be in accordance with the approval given by the planning board.
One of them is the option that the recommendation, one of them includes the condition that the planning board recommended. The other option is the recommendation that you're receiving from staff.
Thank you.
Jerry?
I want to follow up on that, if I may. So it's my understanding that we can change this in this particular case, regardless of what the Planning Commission had adjusted to. And
Absolutely.
it would not go back to, in this particular case, would not go back to the Planning Commission.
Right.
Right.
They are providing you with a recommendation. There's no reason for it to go back.
That's my understanding. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or discussions, council?
Well, why don't we start with a motion? So,
Okay.
all right, I move to approve on second reading the ordinance approving the amended general plan development plan for Safeway Oakbrook Shopping Center with the condition that the plan is revised to provide that the building height be reduced to 36 feet for an assisted living facility.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion by council.
I'll go.
Randy.
Councilmember Stein?
Thank you. I seconded Councilmember Stallman's motion sort of intentionally. I walked this site, as I believe some of the other council members have, seriously, and looked at it from different angles and drove and parked and walked around. And so I think many of us, but speaking specifically for myself, I understand some of the challenges that are presented with that type of grade. I feel that we've heard tonight and that we've heard on other nights that there is a perception or even the expectation that property that is vacant will forever remain vacant. And in this particular case, the property is, to me, rather obviously ripe for development because of various constraints on the site and the economy and the access and other things the developer and many of you know about. It hasn't. I would like to see this property be developed, and I believe that the use is a good use. I note that it's not a perfect argument because, technically speaking, as Mr. Glenn, as Glenn mentioned, that the use is actually categorically a residential use, and so this argument is a little short of as perfect as I'd like for it to be. But to me, the character or the scope, the mass of the building has a commercial and I would even say an office-like mass as opposed to retail. And so to me, there is some logic to the 36-foot height limitation as allowed under our current zoning, and as well as was approved overwhelmingly by our planning board. So with that in mind, as taking a helpful hint from our planning board to provide some balance and some compromise, I'm going to support that motion.
Other comments, questions, discussion?
No, Jerry.
Oh, thank you. This is a tough one. There's definitely a need for this type of housing and service in the city of Littleton, as we all know. Also, I am having an issue, though, with a flat roof. When I was out there looking, standing up there at the entryway on the east, you would be looking out onto a flat roof. And that, to me, would not be too appealing. I would much rather see a pitched roof of some sort. I'm also struggling with the agreement that the city had made with that area and that property, specifically that property, that there is a height limitation for the highest would be 36 for a business, and I do consider this a business. But I am struggling with the idea that now we're going to change it just so we can have something come in and build it. I think it would be a beautiful property if it had a pitched roof. If we're stuck with a flat roof, I think I would definitely have issues with that, and as a neighbor of that area, I would definitely have an issue with it. So,
Councilmember Valdez, the motion does not include a requirement of a flat roof.
I'm saying if it were a flat roof, okay, I would not be too happy about it. I would not, aesthetically, it would not be very appealing. So.
Councilmember Stallman?
Okay, I usually, when we do these, I tend to provide some background for folks just for a variety of reasons, but I think it's important to address the context. So I find that there are pro and con arguments here are both credible. And essentially council's responsibility in this instance as what's referred to as a quasi-judicial proceeding is to render a decision based upon the weight of the evidence presented. To do that, we begin by looking at our obligations under the law. with respect to a PD rezoning, which this is, mandatory findings that council must make to approve a rezoning are that the application is, 1, consistent with the goals and policies of the comp plan, 2, it promotes the general welfare of the community, and 3, it conforms with the intent of the PD district as found in Code Section 10-2-23A and B. Beyond that, Colorado Land Planning and Development Law, the 8th edition, says that in evaluating a rezoning application, local government asks whether the proposal complies with the comprehensive plan, and if so, the proposed rezoning need only bear a reasonable relationship to the general welfare of the community. If it's in conflict with the comprehensive plan, there's generally a need to show either that an error was made in establishing the current zoning or there has been a change in the conditions of the neighborhood that supports the requested zoning change. That's not necessarily the case in a PD rezoning. Mainly those have to apply with respect to the comprehensive plan. This is what the law says. So then we go to our municipal code and we look at the code sections that were referenced, 10-2-23 and the subsections thereunder. The intent of a planned development district is to create and promote public health, safety, and general welfare by allowing a more flexible development based upon a comprehensive integrated plan. And in particular, it talks about the intent of council, any council, but our council in this case, to encourage innovative development or redevelopment of all land uses to meet the contemporary needs of the community by providing for a greater variety and mix of uses, including those which may coexist on the same parcel, provide a process which relates to the design and development of a site to the particular characteristics of the site, and to encourage developments that is consistent with, again, the policies and guidelines established in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan talks about the overall planning process for the city, and then it gets into a bit more detail, and it discusses the following. It says, inasmuch as the success or failure of a comprehensive plan is measured by its impact on the community, we feel it to be significant that the following programs and projects have been initiated or significantly influenced by the comp plan. The first one that's discussed is economic development. In terms of a community-wide goal, it talks about preserving Littleton's unique identity with respect to view preservation, but also an encouragement of variety in housing stocks and types of people. At the same point in time, goal number 5 under the community-wide goals is to preserve existing neighborhood values while encouraging any new development to make the most efficient use of land, resulting in the highest possible standard of living and the best use of natural resources. That's a lot to take in, but what it basically suggests is that when we look at these types of requests that come into us from an applicant who has a piece of property, we tend to have to look at the broader community benefits, and those more often than not traditionally have outweighed somewhat the more narrow, albeit important individual property owner considerations. In this case, we absolutely, throughout the comprehensive plan and the citywide plan that was done in 2014 and much of the economic development work that's been done by this particular council, have acknowledged the need for incremental housing stock and housing that benefits a wide variety of our community, and the charts that the applicant put up with respect to the demographic shifts in the community are well known to us because we've seen them in a variety of instances. It's been said by the city attorney that neighboring property owners do not have a legal claim to the view easement. I think it's hard to assume people would use this property to cut through the neighborhood to get to Mineral to get to Broadway. I think more likely they're going to come in and out and they're going to get on County Line, and I'm struggling a bit to understand how that's going to negatively impact the neighborhood. This will bring jobs. Jobs have been a big issue as far as the community is concerned with respect to the surveys we've done. And there have been reference changes to healthcare and real estate that the gentleman mentioned that I think are fair. At the same point in time, the site plan picture is absolutely worth 1,000 words. It does strike me as being pretty flat. The thing that I think falls, however, squarely in the other direction is that if we're going to look at the comp plan as a guiding document, we do have to look at the zoning code as a specific application that we're bound to follow. And in this instance, it does create a situation. And the problem with that is that the document under 10-2-23 sub D, sub 2, sub B does say specifically that the maximum height of structures located within 150 feet of any residential property boundary shall not exceed 30 feet. The city attorney suggested that that basically means less than 150 feet, and we're right at 150 feet. But I'm, in this instance, not prepared to argue that 1 inch is sufficient in terms of the intent of what we're dealing with. I think if you go back and look at the entire code and the references to what was done in the plan development originally and what the planning board mentioned as well, that there is a compact of some sort here that basically suggests that there needs to be a better buffering, and 149 feet 11 inches isn't necessarily appropriate in my opinion relative to the 150-foot difference. I think in this case, in baseball, the tie goes to the runner, and in this case, I think the tie goes to the neighborhood. I do hope that this project can be worked through and reconstituted, but as it's motioned, I'm going to oppose it. Thank you.
Councilmember Beckman.
It is absolutely the intent of the council to try to find ways to adapt the city to the changing demographics, and there's no doubt about it, the changing demographics support the need for assisted living and senior housing. The fact is there are several city supported, actually through the housing, South Metro housing options, senior housing that is always full. There's lists, there's a demand. Windcrest, there's a demand nearby. There's several other facilities, there's a demand. So I don't think there's any doubt that the validity of a project like this in Littleton is very significant. And in that way, if you were looking at the comp plan and you were looking at that project, you'd see a nexus. But we're talking about zoning. And so we need to get to things that are metrics like square feet and heights. And we need to look at the specific zoning and the existing plan. And I think that's where we then separate on this issue. I don't see a change in circumstance that would require a zoning change. And I don't see, and I question whether the proposed project really does conform with the intent of the district. You know, I'm like all of us. We drive that area all the time. I spent an entire life driving that area. There are no 4-story buildings till you get up around the hospital area. There's no 3-story buildings really till you get over to the bank at the corner of Broadway. That was designed to be really 1.5 stories if you look at the front of that shopping center, considering the peaks and the facades. It was designed that way. It was sold that way. And I remember the hearings here where the community accepted that and a council worked it all through the tough decisions to come up with a plan. I think although the merits of a project like that would certainly fit our community, I don't think that building fits that location, and I don't see any way that I could support varying the existing plan.
Councilmember Cole?
So I agree with what the two Bruces have said. I'd like to also call attention to the existing site plan, which I think we need to honor. We need to respect the neighborhoods, and the existing site plan says that. The desire to be sensitive to the adjacent neighborhood. I think we need to do that throughout Littleton. We don't want to sacrifice what people love about their neighborhoods as we indeed try to accommodate new things. And there are, I think, a couple of incredible sites where such a magnificent project could be located that were not mentioned. So, but that's not for me to recommend right now. The building heights on this site plan, it said, should be designed to gradually increase as you move away from the neighborhood. But it also is the emphasis on small scale and low density in the current site development plan. And I think, as I said, that that's really important to honor that, to preserve the character of the neighborhood. So I can't support this.
I think that it's valuable to look at a project like this from the perspective of meeting growing needs in our community. And without a doubt, an assisted living facility would definitely do that. I think that we have a number of them around our area, and you're right, we don't have any within our area except for the memory care center. I was a little surprised when you showed the map that showed the very limited availability of property in the community that we could place one of these facilities. And I think that might be something we want to at some point take a look at, how we are become a little bit more flexible or a little bit provide more opportunities for these types of developments in the area. I went out to the site and I looked around and I walked around and I tried to peek over your fences. And I understand, yeah, that was me. And I understand the value of the view, but I also understand being a native of the area that you're lucky when you got it and you're not guaranteed it. And that is something I think many of us wish we could sign into little contracts when we found our perfect view corridors. But what's challenging is the agreement that you had. And that agreement is a true document. And it's a document that was an agreement with the community about what would happen on that area while there was existing development. And I think that there, rightly so, is an expectation from the neighborhood at large, not just the Oak Brook neighborhood, but the surrounding area too, including the other retail in front and to the side, or behind and to the side. And there's a value to that. I agree with Councilmember Cole. And it's difficult when you're looking at a small space like this and you want to put a facility that requires a certain number of floors, a certain number of amenities, a certain number of rooms in order to be profitable. But if it doesn't fit, it just doesn't fit. And if it means that you're going to compromise agreements and with neighborhoods and with the community at large, then maybe it does need to be rethought. And while I think that this is that we need these types of facilities, this is not working for me. So I won't support this.
My turn. What I heard is issues around land use, building height, traffic, and somewhat with regard parking. I'll deal with those that I don't have issue with. One is the land use, having an assisted living facility in a lot of places in the city is something that I would be open to. As folks have heard me before, I've been associated with nursing home insurance and long-term care and facilities like this since the 1970s. And the demographics in the United States have changed. And I think the number is something about 10,000 of us in the United States are turning 65 every day. And as we grow older, we tend to grow frailer and have a need for some support and services. Assisted living is on the spectrum and just up over independent living. Having a father that's currently in independent living and a mother who's in memory care, I'm very, very aware of the spectrum of services that are out there, not just from a professional level, but from an emotional level. And as Americans, we like to stay near where our stuff is. Sometimes it's at home, and sometimes it's just a little bit closer. So the use of the property is not something that I have an issue with. With regard traffic, I'm on the long-term care forum in the state. I'm also on the advisory committee on aging. I actually happen to be the vice chair now. So I know the impact that various facilities have. An assisted living facility has fairly minimal impact on traffic. I know whenever there is something built where there is nothing, that's always a concern, but if you're talking about traffic impact, I will say that this is probably about as low on the spectrum as you can be. There might be 4 ambulance calls a month with a 128-bed facility. That's about what we're seeing at the rehab facility that Health South has on Mineral Avenue, so it tends to be supported on that, so traffic isn't as much an issue. And parking is one of those things where it does meet the city code, so it's really hard to argue about traffic on that side. What I then come to is the building height, and that's where I start to have a little consternation with regard to this. I'm familiar with the Phillips and County Line intersection. I'm familiar with the center. I'm familiar with the Mexican eatery that's there. And it happens to be in my district. I approach it both from the north and both on County Line. So I'm familiar with the meandering through Oak Brook. I've been at probably every one of your doorsteps at some point in time. So I'm familiar with that. I haven't been in everyone's backyard, but maybe at some point in time I'll have that opportunity. But that's where the height issue is one that on this particular property causes issues. I know that there is a slope to the facility or a slope to the land because I've come over that hill on County Line and knows that it goes downhill as you approach Broadway. And your car might go faster as you're heading down County Line along that path. So I'm familiar with that. And but the height issue on the property, and even though our planning board has approved a height of 36 feet, I'm not going to support that in this. So that's where we are. And council, any additional comments? Seeing none, we have a motion to support the recommendation as it came from the planning board. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 6 against, with Councilmember Stein voting in favor. The motion fails.
Okay. Council. And we're now at 10 to 10. We still have significant agenda this evening. So at some point in time, we will need a motion if we're going to go past 10 p.m.
Mayor, I would go ahead and do that now.
Okay. And so I was going to entertain that before we get on to the litany of other second readings. And
so moved.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to extend past 10 p.m. Council ready to vote? Okay.
The motion is the vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay. Everyone brought their pillow, I suppose. Okay. Now we move on to item 8B. Just on the third page of our
And
agenda.
Mayor, we've had no one sign up for any of the public hearings between.
So we'll open and close fairly quickly. This is Ordinance 46-2014. It's an ordinance on second reading, amending Ordinance 28, Series of 2013, known as the Annual Appropriation Bill for all municipal purposes for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2014, and ending December 31, 2014. You've had an informational element included with your packet. Do we need any presentation from staff? Seeing no demand for that, the chair is looking for a motion.
Which item we are
I move to
excuse
approve.
me. I have to open the public hearing at 9:49. Close the public hearing at 9:49 and 30 seconds. Looking for a motion.
Move to approve on second reading the ordinance amending ordinance number 28, Series 2013, known as the Annual Appropriations Bill for all municipal purposes for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2014 and ending December 31, 2014.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, Council. Any discussion? Seeing none. Looking for a vote.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay. Item 8C is Ordinance 49-2014, an ordinance on second reading, amending Title III to remove the licensing requirements for peddlers and hawkers, coin-operated vending and amusement machines, taxi cabs, pool and billiard halls, and to provide that the registration and license fee for rental property owners be set annually by council resolution. Again, Council, you've seen this. This is a cleanup of our code, trying to get rid of ordinances that really don't apply any longer. Not needing a presentation from staff, we'll open the public hearing at 9:50. Seeing no one, we'll close it at 9:50 and 30 seconds. Looking for a motion, Council.
Mayor, may I ask just a quick question of staff?
Sure.
This comes from one of my constituents who wanted to know about the registration and license fee for rental properties. I just wonder, is there such, and if so, what are they, and what are they likely to be?
There is. I'm going to ask Glenn to respond to it. It has to do with our inspection program.
Thank you.
We're pulling the number out.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do you want me to hit you offline just from a timing standpoint?
Yeah.
In the annual fees, you'll see that get mentioned several times here. We will have that motion come to us in January with regard to all of our fee schedules. So,
thanks.
Okay. So looking for a motion. Oh, we have a motion and a second.
No, we need a motion.
We don't have a motion.
Okay. Need a motion and a second.
I'll take it. I move to approve on second reading the ordinance amending Title III to remove licensing requirements for peddlers and hawkers, coin-operated vending and amusement machines, taxi cabs, and pool and billiard halls, and to provide that the registration and license fee for rental property owners be set annually by council resolution.
Second.
Council, we have a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay, moving to item 8D is Ordinance 40-14, an ordinance on second reading, adding Section 1 of Chapter 12 of Article 6 to the City Code to establish an electronic citation surcharge. And at the time of motion, we want to substitute in the language with fee by resolution. Deputy City Manager Broughton, any comments?
Thank you, Council. Since first reading, the item has changed. We learned of an operational issue with courts. They don't deal in nickel and dimes, and so they asked us to revise the fee to $6.75. It was first initially $6.85 in your packet earlier. And the second item was addressed by the mayor. We would like you to state $6.75 in the motion, and then have the surcharge be set by the annual fee resolution as we move forward with it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Council looking for a motion?
I'll give it a try. I move to approve on second reading the ordinance adding Section 1 of Chapter 12 of Article 6 of the City Code to establish an electronic citation surcharge of $6.75 and to set future amounts by resolution.
Second.
Okay, Council, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Item 8E is an Ordinance 43-2014, which is an ordinance on second reading granting an easement to XL Energy. This particular one is located in Littleton Village.
Actually, the first one is for an easement at Littles Creek Park to accommodate a wider sidewalk. Where we can have pedestrian and bicycle access for users of the Highline Canal. This is the second part of a multi-phase project. Actually, it's the third part to finish off the sidewalk on the west side of Broadway, connecting the Highline Canal Trail in two locations.
Thank you for that clarification. Director Bloston?
The next one is for Littleton Village, but
Okay.
I'll cover that one in a second.
Sorry about that.
So you're not going away, is that what you're saying?
Any additional questions, discussion? Council looking for a motion?
We need to open the public hearing. Mayor?
Excuse me. We'll open the public hearing at 9:54. Seeing no one approach, we'll close at 9:54 and 30 seconds. Looking for a motion.
Move to approve on second reading the ordinance granting an easement to XL Energy.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Now moving to item 8F, Ordinance 44-2014, which is an ordinance on second reading granting 2 easements to XL Energy. These are in association with Littleton Village.
Yes, they want to extend a power line from their substation in South Park, on South Park Drive to Littleton Village, as well as providing additional power capabilities at other locations throughout that part of Littleton. It's not just to serve Littleton Village, but in an effort to increase the reliability of their facilities, they have asked for these easements to build a bigger and better power line.
Okay, and help me with the location. Where's Horseshoe Park?
Horseshoe Park is west of Broadway. Let's put it this way. It's right behind Bruce's house.
Okay, got it.
That better?
It's where I see the deer.
Yes.
Thank you.
But if you go to Bruce's house and go into his backyard, you'll see Horseshoe Park.
Got it. Thank you.
Peek over the fence.
Okay, Council, going to open the public hearing at 9:51 p.m. Seeing no one approach, we'll close it at 9:51 and 30 seconds. Council looking for a motion.
Move to approve on second reading the ordinance granting 2 easements to XL Energy.
Second.
Okay, Council, we have a motion and a second. Ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you. Item 8G is Ordinance 47-2014, ordinance on second reading regarding judges and court administrator compensation. Do we need any more additional information in addition to what's in packet? Okay, we will open the public hearing at 9:56. Seeing no one approach, we'll close it at 9:56 and 30 seconds. Looking for a motion.
Move to approve on second reading the ordinance regarding judges and court administrator compensation.
Second.
Okay, Council, we have a motion and a second. Ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you. And Council, we now move to general business. The first is Resolution 149-2014, a resolution approving a cooperation and loan agreement between the City of Littleton and Littleton Invest for Tomorrow, and authorizing an initial advance of $50,000 under the agreement. Executive Director Reese.
Well, good evening and happy holidays. We are at LIFT as requesting that the city enter into a loan agreement to provide some funding, interim funding, if you will, for LIFT for the coming year or so until we can actually establish some projects. Councilman Stallman went over the minutes sort of last night's meeting, and didn't mention is that the balance in LIFT's account right now is about $775. So we're basically out of money. However, with a couple of projects on the horizon that we think are moving along fairly well, and I think they'll be here during next year, I think we will begin to see some revenue off those projects. Not from tax increment, if you will, at this point, but actually what we're recommending is that there will be fees charged to the developers of these projects. Typically what we can do would be charge developers upfront fees to basically set up an escrow account where LIFT can draw and pay some of its costs for legal fees, financial analysis, and the negotiation of redevelopment agreements. As Councilman Solomon said, it's a way of putting skin in the game for the developers to make sure they're serious when they come in for a project. But it also, from a pragmatic standpoint, helps us cover some of the costs that we're incurring. Ultimately, that will lead to the creation of development agreements, and as part of the development agreements, it's going to recommend that we also adopt fees for there on an annual basis that would come from the developer or owners initially, again, to cover administrative costs for LIFT. And then those fees in turn could be, and this is kind of up to council and actually to the LIFT board, could be reimbursed from tax increments that are eventually generated from that project. So it's basically upfronting a lot of the costs, but they could be recouped on the backside. So there is a mechanism to pay back this loan. We're showing a 2019 deadline to have them back by then, and I'm fairly confident that we're going to have a couple projects ready to go and actually generating some tax increment.
Council questions or discussion? Deb?
So is this fairly standard with urban renewal and?
Well, I can only speak to my own experience. And so, yes, in the Colorado Springs area, all projects have fees associated with them. And I've actually had loans from the city to front end some of those costs. So all different cities do it differently. Some cities actually pay for the expenses of their urban renewal authorities right up front.
Additional questions or discussion?
Is there a provision for interest to be paid on these loans? And if so, can you tell us about that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Is there a provision for interest to be charged?
We do have an interest rate of,
I believe it's prime and not going into.
yeah, it was tied to the prime. It was like 0.51% plus on prime, yeah. 2-year treasury rate, it's in section 3.1.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cole?
Yeah. I can't support this. We don't have the full support of all of our taxing partners, particularly a major one. And we have several other, in my view, major economic incentives that we can provide to support development and redevelopment in Littleton, just as we have with Breckenridge and the King Soopers development.
Councilmember Stallman?
I didn't finish. I'm trying to get my brain wrapped around this. We're not expecting to have the same results that the Riverfront project had, but that can happen. And I'm not comfortable moving forward this way when we've got other options.
Councilmember Stallman?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've approved 4 plans. It doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense to me to take that step and then not provide the working capital to allow LIFT to execute plans that we've approved. So I'll support this.
Okay. Any other questions of the executive director?
Yes.
Yes.
I have one question. Thanks, and I think you yourself have done an excellent job, and every time you present this information, I appreciate that. Where did the $142,000 come from?
The 100 and what?
The $142,068 that you started with?
Where are you on here? Are you on the agreement?
Top of page 2.
communication.
I don't have, are
It
you
was
talking
on the
about the
communication.
original?
One of the statements in this thing, it says the total funds available to lift at the beginning of the year was $142,068.
Yeah, that was the balance of what Lyft had in its bank account at that point in time.
And they came from where?
From what my knowledge is, it was originally from the Riverfront project.
From the Riverfront project? Okay.
Yeah.
Was there any consideration to use some of that money to pay the city back, some of the money that we had invested at any point?
I think it was anticipated at the time that there were going to be costs involved with developing urban renewal plans, and that money was needed for that.
But Council, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Council, I too would rather wait till after the election before we consider going forward with money, because I want to get a feel for what the citizens out there are really saying or feeling. Let's see. The city has had a couple other projects, successful projects, in my opinion, where we have had 3-year agreements, or about 3-year agreements, King Soopers being one of them, like Brackenridge is another one that's a matter of a few years. Those projects are going forward and doing rather well. I would rather wait until after the May 3rd election. Is that May 3rd?
March 3rd.
I'm sorry, March. I'm sorry, I was doing a Michael Penny. But that's where I am on this. So I will not support this.
Okay. We don't have a motion yet. Council?
I move. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I move to approve the resolution approving the cooperation and loan agreement between the City of Littleton and Littleton Invests for Tomorrow and authorizing an initial advance of $50,000 under the agreement.
Second.
Council, we have a motion and a second. Additional discussion or comments?
Was it a public comment period? Did I sleep through it?
There's no comment.
I just have a couple comments. I think you need to really look at Section 3-1 or 3.1 of the loan agreement to make sure we understand what we're doing here. But we are talking about a potential of $200,000 with $50,000 of it being payable in 2015, and it goes up through 2019, which implies a potential of $50,000 a year, but that each additional payment after this one would be subject to some review. But I want to go on that. I don't want to get caught up in the discussion that economic development doesn't have any front-end costs, because of course it does. And this comment, it's not going to cost anything to the taxpayers. I think every program has some setup costs. I think it's part of doing business for cities in the 21st century that we're going to have economic development. It's going to have to be paid partly by the city. But clearly there is another financing mechanism in urban development that doesn't exist in other economic development. But I got to tell you that in the future, I'm not willing to approve any open checkbook without appropriate oversight, with the same attention to detail as we do with our budget and we do with periodic financial reports. You know, the correct process here would be to have something similar to what we do with the budget for the rest of the city. We need to have some kind of periodic lift statement or periodic financial report. We need to have some justification and accountability to the council for the city expenditures, and that's part of our council duties to oversee that, and we haven't done that for the $140-some thousand that was in the account, and we're not going to do it for other than what's in the council communication for this first 50. That's not acceptable to me in the future, but I do believe that we're obligated to proceed with economic development and pay our bills up to this point. But I have to say that in the future, any consideration of any expenditure, I'm not going to be interested in approving unless I get the same kind of accountability as we do for everything else we do in the city.
Councilmember Stallman?
Just a clarification on that. And Lyft has financial reports that they present at the board meetings. Oversight on my part, and I'll take responsibility. I'll be happy to get those and have them forwarded to, or get the city manager to forward them to the rest of council from the executive director, because you're quite right.
Yeah, and Bruce, I really appreciate what you've done since you've been in that liaison role, but we are going back a little bit in time here, and we don't have anything to, as I said, sure. We're kind of where we are.
Yeah. Just to respond to your comments, in that same section 3.1, it says prior to draws being approved, LIFT shall provide written documentation to the city indicating the use of funds requested and invoices reflecting the expenditures from the previous draw, and such amounts shall be paid and shall be dispersed. But it also says, subject to LIFT's obligation to provide written documentation to the city indicating the use of funds requested and invoices reflecting the expenditures made. Within section 3.1, it does provide for an accounting of those expenses and that each draw be done at $25,000 increments. Given the level of effort on the part of council over the years, I actually see those as small increments where we'll get accountability. So,
yeah.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out a couple of so when we crafted this, and you actually just pulled some of the section to get to your comments and Councilman Beckman's comments, when I put the original draft and worked with the city attorney on this, we very specifically made sure that it was coming back to you. It was in relatively small increments, and there was a responsibility to communicate what the expectation of the upcoming payments were and what the previous draw was used for, so that the accountability, knowing that there was going to be a fine microscope of the use of these funds. Also acknowledging that you do need to spend money to make money, so to speak, and the economic development costs money to move this forward. We still don't have any pending proposals that have come before the city staff. So, you know, I would agree that there is not, I think Councilmember Cole spoke a little bit to this, you know, the revenues coming in terms of upcoming projects, there aren't any at this point. We certainly hope within the next period of time that the phone starts to ring and projects do start to move, specific projects start to move forward. This is a one-time, I just want to make sure that everyone understands, this is a one-time $150,000. This is not a line of credit. This is a maximum of $200,000 loan. 150 is being asked for tonight, or 50 is being asked for tonight, so it's 150 remaining. And council has control over whether those funds get expended or not and transferred over. So you've got as much control as we could put into this while still allowing it to occur, and flexibility by LIFT to do what they're tasked to do. A couple other comments just in general. The question came up around, projects and when they start and what's happening. And I think Executive Director Jim Reese made it clear that part of what they're trying to do is get some fee revenues that will come in advance before any project actually comes forward, because it's going to take some time before any project, even once that phone rings, it doesn't magically come in and say, oh, we've got everything done, because you guys just spent several hours going through the land use component of it, and that question will need to be answered, or at least confident enough that any developer is willing to spend the time looking further and deeper into the revenues and expenditures and capital projects, et cetera. So it's going to be some time before the city gets that proposal in there, and those funds will need to be fronted to some extent. We do anticipate projects will continue to come in, and at some point somebody may want to use urban renewal as a piece of it. Councilmember Cole has pointed out we have other alternatives should that level of funding not require the urban renewal component, but a simple sales tax share back, fee waivers, whatever the situation may be. So just some additional comments around that. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, additional questions or discussions? We have a motion and a second. Vote yes is in favor of the ordinance. Excuse me, I'm in favor of the resolution. I'm sorry. Okay.
The vote is 5 in favor, with Council members Cole and Valdez voting no. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Next up is item 9B, Ordinance 54-2014. This is an ordinance on first reading, submitting a charter amendment to the electors of the city for the March 3rd, 2015 special election, amending Section 64 of the city charter regarding eminent domain. Deb, you want to comment?
Shouldn't want me to make a motion?
Can make a motion, yes.
Move to approve the ordinance on first reading, submitting a charter amendment to the electors of the city for the March 3rd, 2015 special election, amending Section 64 of the city charter regarding eminent domain, and to schedule a public hearing at a special meeting of the city council on December 30th, 2014 at 4 p.m. in council chamber.
Second.
Okay, council, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Deb?
Couple comments were made earlier this evening regarding the procedure on this and the process, and some references back to the Walmart. Intimately aware of the Walmart situation, and in fact, the Walmart, those of us that were opposed to the Walmart, we came down to the council and we asked them to put it on the ballot for us. And they refused, which triggered the need to go get the petition signatures to have it put on the ballot by citizens. I would like the city attorney to reflect a bit on that, what the process is, and that this is within our guides.
So there are two ways to get a charter amendment on the ballot under the statute. One is through the petition process, which is how the current amendment on eminent domain or on urban renewal is appearing on the ballot, and then the second is by an ordinance from council. And there are a couple ways that ordinances are brought forward. I think the most typical one that you see is where staff recognizes an issue or has a concern or something that they want to propose, and we'll put forward an ordinance for you to consider on first reading. Another way would be if a council member has a concern or some legislation that they want to consider, then they can ask staff to draft that ordinance and bring it forward for the council to consider. And a third way is for citizens to ask their elected officials to bring forward legislation for the council to consider. And that's what we have here. As a citizen, it is completely within their right to ask you as their elected officials to sponsor that legislation, and it's completely appropriate for you to agree to do that on their behalf or to decline to do that. So citizens always have the right to ask you as their representative, and it's your prerogative to decide whether to decline or to agree to do that. So while I know in the public comments some people were unhappy with the way that this happened, it is completely appropriate and within your authority for the mayor to take this request and ask that the ordinance be put before you on first reading. I will remind you it's on first reading. It hasn't been approved. It has to be approved tonight. It has to go to a public hearing. We have to have a public hearing. It then has to be approved, and then it is put on the ballot. So.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stallman.
Yeah, I do paraphrase Captain Louis Reynaud in Casablanca. I'm shocked that there's opposition to this by virtue of the fact that we've been admonished for months that our resolution to not use condemnation was basically toothless. So if this puts it in the charter and it becomes full of teeth, then I think it's totally fair to ask the citizens if this is something that they would prefer to do.
Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, and the important dimension that this has, that it does not exist in any other form right now, is the ability of a property owner to request the process. And that's an inherent right in private property right that would be excluded by that other resolution, or at least it's the other resolution, as I see it, is silent to that issue, probably to the detriment of the person who wants to do a urban renewal eminent domain action at their request. And I do know that in the Riverfront project, which had obviously some failures ultimately, there were some landowners and property owners that requested that. That was part of what they wanted, and it made sense to them. And that made the process work and made it financially feasible for them. I don't know the ins and outs, but I know that that's an important part of it. So this does have merit.
Councilmember Cole.
So I have a question. So with the citizen initiated ballot measure touches on part of this, how, if I could see potentially citizens voting for both. So what, can you clarify what happens there?
Sure. So if both charter amendments receive majority votes, they both would go into the charter. And we would have the requirement that you could not use eminent domain or the Urban Renewal Authority could not use eminent domain or condemnation unless it's requested by a property owner. And then we would also have a charter provision that says any urban renewal plan that involves, and the different things enumerated, eminent domain, condemnation, tax increment financing, needs to be ratified by the voters.
So they both could go in, is what you're saying?
Yes, they're not alternatives. They're two charter amendments that would amend separate portions of the charter.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stein.
In view of the late hour, let me apologize for being redundant, but I want to reinforce what Councilmember Stallman said in spectacularly less articulate fashion. In the months of September and October, I was approached numerous times at various places in the city, including King Soopers and the post office, by people who said, sign this petition, the city council is trying to condemn your property, don't let them do that. Another version of the event was, and I'm quoting exactly, City Council has already condemned 744 acres of property in Littleton. Sign this petition. Don't let them do that. In response to, in part, that message, City Council passed a resolution promising not to condemn. And in my opinion, it's the same. Condemnation, eminent domain. And we then had a number of people come down and chastise us for any day we could lift this resolution, any city council, any Tuesday night. And so now this is, I believe, a very responsible and very responsive action in considering, and should we choose to pass this, to be responsive to yet another citizens group who are asking us to do the same thing that our citizens have been asking us to do for months now. So I'm highly supportive of it for all those reasons, and thank you, Councilmember Stallman, for putting it better and more succinctly than I did.
Thank you. I'm going to go out of character and say that I was highly insulted by those folks that referred to this as a lazy approach. I very actively campaigned, even when I was unopposed. I actively campaigned. I've actively held town hall meetings, and I know that other council members at this dais have actively campaigned. And to say that it's a lazy approach to leverage those folks that have been elected and campaigned in a very legal approach, I find personally insulting. And Pam, you can shake your head, but that's meant for you and others. Council ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
We move to item 9C, which is Resolution 150-2014, a resolution expressing opposition to the initiated charter amendment adding Section 64.5, urban renewal, to the Littleton City Charter and encouraging the electorate to vote no on the measure on the March 3rd, 2015 ballot.
I move to adopt the resolution in opposition to the initiated charter amendment adding Section 64.5, urban renewal, to the Littleton City Charter and encouraging the electorate to vote no on the measure on the March 3rd, 2015 ballot.
Second.
Council, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? Deb?
This is absolutely, I think, one of the most important resolutions that we can
we can do. We have sat up here now this is into year 4, working on economic development and working on a aging city, which we again heard it tonight. We know we have failing infrastructure. We know we have redevelopment issues. We know we have some zoning that here and there. We know we have some land use issues. We know we have drainage problems. We know we have streets and sidewalks, etc. We know that we have pockets throughout our community that need a lot more help than most of the development community is willing to do. Urban renewal we continue to say this and say it and say it. It is a tool. It is not a mandate. It does not mean that we are blighting the city and condemning homes and kicking people out and filling developers' pockets with money. It doesn't mean any of that. And I have been absolutely, completely embarrassed by and saddened and frankly sickened by the tenor that is being generated in this community over something that is used as a benefit for the community. It can be misused. It can be abused. It can go awry. None of us are sitting up here with that intention. None of us are sitting up here with that goal. We are up here looking at this from every angle as we have been for the last 3+ years, and we will continue to do so. We will be diligent, we will be very watchful, and we will be very cautious, as is our appointed boards. We need to stand strong on this. We need to support the tools and the equipment that this community that we are entitled to, not only by the state but by our own charter. Appreciate that the citizens have put this forth. This is not a issue of whether or not we can disagree, but this is definitely, I think, without a doubt, an important issue in the city of Littleton standing strong and making itself viable long into the future. To the ballot issue that is on the ballot, we would be the only city in the entire state of Colorado to have that. There's a reason why no one else has that. And Littleton certainly does not need to wear that badge. I heartily support this resolution and encourage council to also support.
Council, we have a motion and a second. Additional discussion? All that I can say is ditto to Councilmember Brinkman's statements. Okay, ready to vote?
The vote is 5 in favor, with Council Members Cole and Valdez voting no. The motion carries.
Moves us to item 9D, Resolution 139-2014, a resolution encouraging the Colorado General Assembly to enact meaningful construction defects litigation reform during the 2015 legislative session.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to probably make a comment on this, which is owner-occupied attached housing has been an issue in the state. If Council had a chance to read a missive that was put out to the Metro Mayor's Caucus, there's additional statistics saying that Colorado is one of the few states with existing legislation like this, and they're one of the few states suffering from a lack of diversity of construction housing that's occurring. We've heard during our projects that we've considered in 2014 that this is a definite issue for new construction and is holding back the ability of developers to find either liability, insurance, or additional funding for projects dealing with owner-occupied attached housing, which would provide for diversity of housing in the city. which provides for an ownership position in the city, which is some of the comments that we have. We've had some discussion with lobbyists of the Colorado Municipal League, as well as the Metro Mayor's Caucus, and the Denver Regional Council of Government that all recognize this as an issue. It's important that the legislature takes it up. This resolution does not go as far as some other jurisdictions where Lakewood has actually put forth an ordinance that deals with the issue. At this point in time, some of our legal advice has indicated that is welcoming a litigation path that we're choosing not to take. The City of Parker has undertaken a particular attachment to the property plat, which becomes then a permanent addition, which, when the legislature does actually modify it, still attaches to that plat. So what this is doing is saying, cheering the effort on, and hoping that with some of the change in the leadership of the legislature, this is one. The council has been active before. Many of us have talked with legislators about this. We've been down to the state capitol. So this is giving us at least a piece of paper to say, hey, this is a position of our council, and looking at this for the benefit of our city.
Just real briefly, echo what the mayor has said. I represent the mid-sized municipalities on the CML board, and we had a board meeting last week, and this is a very important piece of legislation that we have coming up. We met with the new Senate Majority Leader and shared a lot of our concerns with him on this. There is a lot more opportunity this legislative session to see a stronger opportunity for resolution on this, and to hopefully be able to move us forward progressively with this without having to do extreme measures as some of the other communities have done. I think this is strong for us. It supports what CML's efforts are. They are, it's all hands on deck for this. Then in speaking to the legislature, or the legislator that we spoke to, he was very, very strong in voicing that hearing from the municipalities is key. It is incredibly important for them to hear what we are dealing with and how we're dealing with it. So I think this resolution, while it may not change anything, at least it will show support for those that we do obviously support through CML and the other organizations. So thank you.
Councilmember Beckman?
And just to add, because it's so easy for people that don't fully understand what we're trying to do to find fault or take shots at it when they really don't understand. I do want to say that one of the concerns of the mayors and all the people that are presenting this is to continue to provide protection to the homeowners for the property that they have, and any faults that may be in that property, that they're adequately compensated and taken care of appropriately by the law. It's just that the law that exists in Colorado goes far beyond that.
Councilmember Stallman?
Yeah, I completely agree. I just ask that if our elected representatives at the Capitol continue to dither in favor of special interests, the city manager at some point would be inclined to come back with something a little sterner, like an ordinance. I think that'd be worthwhile.
We will be prepared.
Thank you.
So noted. Council ready to vote?
Yep. The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Everyone have a great set of holidays. Council, enjoy the week off next week. We'll see you on the 30th.